Yeah, so I'm Kyle Shidler. I work at American Savings Bank in the corporate banking department, but just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up on Guam, and I eventually moved to San Diego when I was 16. I went to San Diego State, and I'm really envious that there's a program like this that the bank can support. Thinking back, I really wish there was something like this because I always wanted to start a business or have an idea, but that passion never found me. So I thought, okay, I went into finance. I majored in that. My father, and his words of wisdom was, you just push people around and you make good money. But really what attracted me to that was an opportunity to kind of look under the hood of all the different businesses or organizations that a banking would have. I get to see a lot of their financials, talk to the owners, how they run. And I always felt that one day I would probably get inspired by everybody else's success that I lived vicariously through, that I would one day start my own. But that hasn't happened. I continue to be seduced by salary and, living wage and working from honestly really 8 to 6 p.m. Hours, a lot longer in real life than what you might think. But I am very proud to be part of American Savings Bank. We've been sponsoring this program event for almost a decade. Yeah. So we really believe in entrepreneurs. We think that's a vital part of the economy. If you think about any business or even a nonprofit, there's always a founder. There's always an idea or a small group of individuals or one individual that basically starts that. And if it wasn't for those individuals, I wouldn't have a job. So American Savings, through a partnership with PACE, Shidler College of Business, the UH Venture competition, we are proud to support those, to cultivate entrepreneurs, business ideas, and really to celebrate innovation. So with that, I'm just proud to say that we're happy to be here and support this program. I'll leave you with one quote by Peter Drucker: "The best way to predict the future is to create it." Thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, I'm Jeff. Great to chat with you guys today. Welcome to the Bootcamp. Just want to give a quick plug to all the PACE programs. I recognize a few of you, so I think I've done some version of this in previous semesters. So sorry if it's a little bit repetitive for those that have seen this before, but we're going to be way more in the weeds and here's some hands-on stuff today. So that's one thing I do want to emphasize. First half, we're going to be doing a lot of conceptual work, and the second half we're going to dive in and practice a little bit. Okay, so okay, all right. So objectives today: we want to learn about the lean methodology in the business model canvas. We're going to really focus on customer discovery. I think this is something that differentiates a solid plan from just a concept, is getting out there and talking to customers. So this is going to be a primary focus today on how do you do customer discovery, and we're going to actually talk about interview starts and practice those a little bit. And I guess the last thing is what else? That's what I wanted to know from you guys today. I'll come back to that. Maybe we could just quick. It's more than I thought. So maybe if anyone wants to shout out, what did you guys come here for today? Maybe how many goals you want them to learn how to accomplish today? Yeah.
I'm Sasha. I'm a PhD student of Communication Information Sciences, and I would like to learn how to write a business plan for the thing that I want.
Good. Sounds good. Any other goals for today?
My name is Ivy. I'm going to compete for the venture competition.
All right.
So that's the reason I'm here.
So that's a good question. How many people are in the venture registered for the venture? Great. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I assume all of you have an idea at least, right? That's okay, great. So, a bit about me. At Berkeley, Columbia, I used to work at McKinsey, worked at Facebook and Instagram for many years, and then I worked at a fintech called Revolut. I run my own consulting business now. I consult startups on their growth strategy. So my specialty is how do you acquire and engage users. So I've been doing this for 20 years in some shape or form. And so we're going to talk about that, but really on that, what we call like the startup plan, like 0 to 1 phase. Like, how do you launch something? How do you create something? That's what we're talking about today. A little bit of credibility building. Yes. So I did coach last year. My team that I coached won the competition. So I'm not just here talking. I have a little bit of credibility. So that's the team that won last year. So and they're started. They're working on their idea. So from 4 PhD students to full-fledged business off running. So if that's not motivating to you, then I'm not sure why you're here. Okay, so we have a lot of stuff to cover. You'll find kind of constantly going back to my schedule. It's kind of small, but we're going to be focused, like I said in the beginning, on thinking about the concepts. What is the lean methodology? What are customers? What is a value prop? Then we're going to get into break, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about concepts on what is a minimum viable product. And then before lunch, we're going to get into how do you bring this together? How do you actually go from concept to actual real life, getting words on a page for your venture competition? And that number one thing you do is get out and talk to people. So we're going to talk about that. Then after lunch, we're actually going to work on practical interview skills and walk through your interview guides, which we'll be creating together. Okay. For those of you that don't have a concept or an idea you're working on, you can either during the break or during the work session, you can work on the concept what you're working on today as a group, or partner with somebody else in the group. Okay. All right, so first off, we're going to focus on I think the core concept today is what is the lean methodology and the business model canvas, right? So there is a great article which I've linked here, and I've got all this up for you guys on Drive. But I summarize it here. So the old way of thinking is like you would go, and this is like my generation, or even like my parents' generation, you would go into a basement and you would clack away at your typewriter and put a business plan together and get some money and go launch a business. When I was in undergrad, it was .com 1.0. I remember like all my friends would sit there and write a business plan and try to go pitch and get some money. But that is like, it's a very like step-by-step process. But the lean methodology it's more dynamic. It's really like, you're not there to put the concept and hope it launches. The focus is on how do you do this iteratively and quickly, all right? So that is the focus of the lean methodology. And I think I linked the article here on the Harvard Business Review article, but the key sentence is right here. Developers, like coders and ICS majors and stuff, you spend thousands of man hours to get it ready for launch with little customer inputs. Only after building and launching the product does the venture get any substantial feedback from customers, and when the sales force attempts to sell it. And too often, after months or even years of development, entrepreneurs learn the hard way that customers do not need or want the product's features. This is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid this thing where you sit there for a month or two, develop a plan, get some money, develop something, and then launch it and find out that you want this, right? And I bring that back to like, what the business we all understand. Restaurants, we all understand restaurants, right? So in previous era, you would go and you would raise money from your friends, family, your bank, and say, okay, I have a new restaurant idea. I'm going to go open a restaurant, right? The new modern way is like, how do we test? How do we iterate our way into there to de-risk our solution? Right? So let's just take a restaurant. Like, how would you move more quickly without just going and raising $1 million and opening a restaurant? What would be another way you could test that and get feedback quicker?
How's your friends? Takeaway, maybe?
Yeah.
Test food.
Takeaway, talk to your friends, test kitchen, little pop-up.
Some secondary research.
What kind of second? That's good.
Looking at restaurants that are similar to the one you want to start, looking at
Yeah.
reviews online.
So we're looking at secondary research, maybe test with friends, maybe do a pop-up, maybe do a farmer's market, maybe do a space where you rent out that restaurant space. A lot of restaurants are closed for lunch. Maybe you rent that Saturday lunch spot from them, right? That's like the new modern way of thinking of startups. It's not, I put a plan together, I raise $1 million and I gotta launch something. It's how do I go step by step and move quickly? It's not just about de-risking, but moving faster. Like, who wants to sit there and wait for 6 months to come up with a plan, to raise money, and another 6 months to launch something, and another year to get it off the ground? You might be waiting for a year or two before you even see if your customer wants this. Instead, wouldn't you want to know if your idea is any good tomorrow? Next, so the goal today is you should be able to take your idea and go figure out people who want this concept tomorrow, as opposed to waiting to after the venture competition, hope you win that 10,000 bucks, then go to try to see if people want it. No, like you should come to the venture competition with feedback that says, yep, I got this feedback right here from my customer, they want it. Nothing is more compelling than saying customers already want this product. Okay. All right. Another, this is again from the article. The traditional way of thinking is we build a business plan and we go step by step. And the new way of thinking is hypothesis driven. I have a hypothesis, I'm gonna go test it. And just iterate as quickly as possible. The new product development process, you would have a big product management process, you go through step-by-step plan. Right now, it's just get out there and test your hypothesis. That is the way you develop. And we're going to talk about that today. And then I think the key thing is in the old way, because you would develop a plan, raise money, and launch something, failure would be catastrophic. If you raise $1 million to launch a restaurant, and nobody came, that like you're done. Right. So, but if you have a concept for a new restaurant and you test it in a test kitchen and it doesn't work, you can go back and test again and test again and test again. Right. So this is also the key. Right. Like the fact is, if you can continue to iterate and grow, and there's no big catastrophic risk to your business idea. Right. So that is the lead methodology. All right. So, quick, just a little bit, this is not just me talking, this is truly what's done in the world. If you go to any tech startup out there, they might not use the word lean methodology, but the concepts we're going to be learning about today, customer discovery, talking to your customers, MVPs, minimum viable products, like these are concepts that everyone uses. Does anybody know who this guy is? Brian Cheffy? He's the founder of Airbnb, okay? So Airbnb, hopefully you guys have all used it or your families have used it. Mega success. And so in this interview, he's talking about how he developed his product roadmap and how they got started from a concept to really building out Airbnb.
So we literally commuted to New York. So we would be in Y Combinator for 2-night dinners. And then he might say, Joe and I would go to New York. You literally would knock on the door of small hosts who had their addresses and say, knock, hello, hey, it's Brian, Joe, or founders, we want to meet you. It's a little creepy. Just to knock on the door unannounced. We need an excuse to get out. So they came up with an offer that the host could refuse. We sent a professional photographer here in photo record. Of course, we didn't have any money, and we could have employed photographers. So Joe and I, we showed everyone, and they're like, this company's pretty small. Teams home business became Airbnb's secret weapon. It's how they learn what people love. It's really hard to get even 10 people or anything. But it's not hard if you spend a ton of time with them. So if I want to make something amazing, I spend time with it. And I'm like, well, what if I did this? What if I did this? What if I did this? So those questions, a handcrafted experience is born. You find out, hey, I don't feel comfortable with guests. I don't know who they are. Well, what if they have profiles? Great. What do you want their profile? I want a photo, great. I want to really work, where they in school, okay. So you have that stuff. And then you literally start designing potential devices. The creation of the peer review system, customer report, all these things came from a literally very nice joke that we do by the iPhone. Steve Jobs didn't come sleep on your couch, but I did. It was a quick skateboard experience that was really stuck in your mind. I remember we met with a couple hosts, and it's winter, it's snowing outside, and we're like in snow boots, and we walk up to the apartment, and we put your photograph down. And we're like, hey, I'll upload your photos to the website. Do you have any other feedback? And he comes back with a book, and he's got like dozens of pages of things. And he ends up creating like a product roadmap for us. Like, we should have this. And we're like, oh my God, this is our roadmap. Does he get custom? I think that always stuck in our mind as the roadmap often exists in mind that users to design this work.
All right, so I bring this up because here's the founder of a $100 billion company, and the last thing he said is the most important thing. The roadmap is in your customer's mind, right? So he mentions this 3 different times. He's not talking about, okay, we had this vision, we created it, and it was great. He says, like, you know, we got our ideas by listening to customers. You know, this story, the the photography store going into people, this is like a Silicon Valley lore. This is a classic story. Everyone talks about how Airbnb would grow by going into their homes and photographing. But that's actually not the core part of the story. The core part of the story is that the way that they use those meetings was not just to get people to list their apartment or their home on Airbnb, was to get them to tell them what you needed next, right? So he says it 3 times. We listened to our customers. That's how we got this. We went there, they told us what they needed. That's how we developed this new feature, right? So that's what we're learning today. It's that if you want to win the venture competition, if you want to launch business now, later, whatever, it shouldn't be just you sitting there in your head, basement, clacking away at your computer, hoping that you have a great idea. Just talk to somebody. That is the crux of what we're here today to talk about. Okay. All right. So there is one tool, and again, I have to link this, but we're going to go over it. So if you can't read it, it's okay. You can review it afterwards. We're going to talk about it in detail. This is the business model canvas. So the business model canvas is a solid tool about like, how do you think about the different parts of your business? Okay. So it's everything from revenue, cost. So what we're focusing today is who are your customers and what is your value prop? That is like the core of what we're trying to figure out today. This is how you win. Like if you want to create something, the rest of it matters, but you can't get started unless you know who your customer is and what is the value prop that you're going to provide to them. Okay, that's what we're focusing on today. I'm not saying that that's everything. Obviously, you have to make money, but if you can't get past the start, you can't even get started. And that's what we're focusing on today. All right, so to make it real, I like to use a real life example. So let's brainstorm for business, okay? So to make it easy, I'm going to narrow it down. Who here has been reading about AI and all the generative AI books on those, right? So for those that don't know, with artificial intelligence now, you can type in a prompt and create an image. Surfer dude, a wiki, boom, here's a picture. You can upload a script and create a video. Here's a script of 1,000 words. I want a young lady with black hair with a happy tone to read this from you. Boom, done, right? You can type in a concept, tell me a lecture about the lean startup methodology, and it will create a 30-page slide deck for you in an hour. Okay, so generative AI is like the future, right? So what our fake business for today, what could you use artificial generative AI for? If you could create any kind of text, video, image, what are some things that we could use that for?
Make screenplays.
Screenplays,
Yeah.
great. Okay, any other ideas? We're going to talk a few and we're going to go on which one we want to focus on today.
In the social media posts.
Yeah, that's already out there. There's entire influencers with millions of followers that are purely AI driven. Content, image, everything. Social media influencers, huge future. By the way, all the influencers you see in Waikiki, they will not have a job in like a year now. Why would you have them do that? Pay them $1,000 to sit there on Waikiki with your deity when you could just have an avatar do it for free, right? Yeah. All right. So social media, screenplays, love that. Very different. Any other? Yep.
It'd be like a step-by-step guide on how to learn a skill or do something.
Yeah, educational material, right? So education. All right, let's vote. Okay, so education. We have social influencers. And screenplays. Love it. Okay, 3 very different ideas. Who was for number 1? Focus on education. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 people. Okay. Who wants to focus on social media influencers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Screenplays. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Education it is. All right. So we're gonna focus today on using generative AI. It doesn't really matter. The point is we're gonna use that because we need a real life example. So generative AI, let's say right here in your city, we're gonna teach a course. We're gonna create a bot that teaches Calculus 101. Okay, that's our. We're gonna have AI to teach how. What is the Georgia calculus class? What's it? Math 241. Math 241. The math 241, no more professors that you think you can generate, actually, I want a young man with black hair that's funny. I want an older woman that's mean and yells at me. Whatever you want, you can customize your professor from now on. Okay, that's our new concept for today. Okay, custom professors. All right, great. Doesn't matter. The point is we just need a concept to come up. All right, so. Yes, we are way ahead of schedule. All right, great. All right. Great. Before we move on, I have a little bit extra time. So any questions? Let's take a pause. There are a lot of. Does this resonate? Like you think when you hear this, is it starting to feel like, oh yeah, I could use that? Maybe.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Whenever I like research AI and stuff and like think about like startups, some people say like, don't have solution in search of a problem, right? Like how, isn't this something that's along those lines?
Exactly. Well, for today's purpose, we're just using it, but the focus today, the tools we're going to be learning, that's it. Like you have to have a problem you're solving instead of a solution in search of a problem, right? But the only reason I come up with a solution for just so we can illustrate some of the concepts. Oh yeah, but totally. But that's a very good point of distinction. The whole idea of the lean methodology is to find the problem that you're solving and not just have a solution, right? Now, this is a common problem, especially in academia, right? A lot of professors will come to me and say like, hey, I have this technology, how can I build a business? And my first question to them is, well, what problem would you solve in the real world? Well, you don't understand, like this is like the greatest way to do X, Y, Z. Okay, but is there a use case in the real world, in the commercial world, that will pay for this product? And this is exactly flipping that. It's like, let's find a problem and then we'll develop a solution. I do want to pause though, right? When you think about startup, this is very common way to think about it. Like, what is the problem? What does the customer want? And let me go build that to solve their need, right? This is the way a lot of Silicon Valley startups work. This is the way a lot of retail startups work. But this is not the only way to do it. Like the classic alternative is like Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs like would never say like, oh yeah, the customer told me to build the iPad, right? Or his classic is, you know, when he first came with the iPhone, he would say like, oh yeah, like only idiots would want a keyboard. That doesn't make sense. So you say you want it, trust me, you don't want it. That is a very different way to think about it. The classic quote on this is, you know, 100 years ago, if you asked somebody what car they would want, they'd say, I want a faster horse and buggy, right? And so that is a very different mindset on building a product. It's very visionary, it's forward thinking, it's you don't know what you want, I'll tell you what you want. That is a very valid way to create a product. It's much higher risk though, right? Because you're creating a demand. You're creating a new market, a new concept, a new demand. The lean methodology is very much like, I will find a problem, and I will solve that problem. And it's much more like a systematic way to start a business or not. Right.
I was gonna ask you, how would you balance those two ways? Like,
Yeah.
the very highly risky one, right? And then
Yeah.
the one that's maybe more traditional, looking at the demand.
Yeah.
And the data and like solving the problem.
Yeah.
You know, or is there a way to balance?
It is hard. No, so for instance, if you are doing something that's just totally new categories, it's very hard to balance it, right? But hopefully, like I assume we had a concept in mind, right? And so what I want to teach today is like, how do you go do customer discovery? How do you think about what a customer wants? And the goal would be like, okay, I have a concept in mind, but let me go start to talk to customers, and then maybe you'll iterate and change your concept. I think that's the way to balance it. Now, if your concept is, I'm going to create, I don't know, whatever, like electric vehicles of the past, now we're going to be doing in like covered vehicles, like it's a little bit hard to like, if you're really thinking future, like something that no one's ever thought before, it is a little hard to do this that. But for most folks, you can take the concepts today and start to iterate on your idea.
What about the approach where you are scratching your own itch, that they say that sometimes the best inventions are made of that?
Right, so you are the first customer. Like, what is that? A classic. You are, especially if you have a deep expertise in a certain industry and you know a problem, best way to go about starting. But then I would say, don't stop there. You should You've interviewed your first customer and know what she wants. That first customer is you, right? But hopefully you'll go talk to 20, 30, 40 customers in the next few weeks or months, right? But so in answer to your question, that's a great way to start. Great way to start. Don't stop there. Yeah. Concepts. Question about the concepts.
Problems and need, when we say the problem we are trying to find is actually a need some people have.
Yeah. Yeah, the problem that we're trying to solve is a need, it's a pain point, and that's what we're discussing today. Yeah. All right, any other questions? All right. So. All right, that's my old business. I'm not gonna do that. We changed our business. We're gonna do AI professors. All right. So the core concept we're talking about first is who is our customer? So when we think about the field, talk about customer, but I actually brought it in because you want to focus on not just your customer, but who are your stakeholders, your beneficiaries, etc. Right? So in our AI professor example, you might say, well, the customer is the student, and we should be solving, or the university, one or the other. We should be just solving what that customer wants. True, but you also have to think about all the other people in mind, right? So for instance, there's lots of people that donate to the university. They want to know who's teaching. They might not be happy that a robot's teaching now, right? You might want to think about recruiters afterwards that are hiring students. They want to know that you had real life examples, not just a robot teaching, maybe, or maybe they think a robot is better than a real life professor, right? You want to think about all these different aspects of like who's involved. So one thing this is the way I like to think about it. Most people, when they go on this discovery, what we're calling discovery, they focus on what does my customer want? And I brought in a little bit to say, what do like your beneficiaries or your stakeholders want? And my definition of that is anybody who's using your solution, benefiting from your solution, impacted by your solution. What's their role in this? What do they want? Okay. What is their pain point? What do they want to gain out of it? So it's a little bit vague, like, okay, what do they want? So one of the tools we have is what we call the value proposition canvas. So first, we'll start off, well, let's do this, right? So let's talk about this. So for our AI professor, who's our beneficiary? So it is that one, students, right? Who else? Who else would be benefiting from our solution, using our solution, or impacted by our solution?
Professors.
Aha, other professors. We didn't talk about that.
School itself.
Yeah, university.
Professionals who are outside of school.
Yeah, professionals.
Future employers.
Future employers, we put that in professional, love it. Who else would be impacted by this using this endeavor? Anybody else?
Donors to the school.
Say it again.
Donors.
Donors to the school, love it. Donors. Okay, who else? Anybody else?
Administrators.
Administrators, yes, not just the university itself, but administrators. Okay, I'll throw another one in there that's kind of, you know, think about benefits providers, because insurance, their employees, everybody needs insurance and there's liability, there's health benefits and everything is expensive. That's one really big cost. So we're going to call it benefit providers. You don't need to provide benefits. You don't need to provide parking and health insurance and all that for an AI bot.
Union.
Aha, who said that? I love it. Other professors, I'm gonna put that up here, the union. Okay, love that. Okay, great. So we have a list of people that are using our solution, students, university, impacted by our solution, professors, the union, right? Impacted by our solution, professionals, future employers, donors, and such. All right, so we have a list of people that are being impacted by this. Again, we want to think about this because you might say, this is actually like, this is awesome. Customized education, not just at the type of person I want to see, but the tone, the cadence, the schedule that I want, etc. This is great. This is the end of education, or the future of education. Right, great. But then at the end of the day, if one of those people here is like your professionals, future employers, donors, they don't like that, and they provide all the money, what does it matter, right? I mean, or likewise, if they're saying like, hey, I'd love to do that, cut some cost, like why do we need Jeff? Like when I can just have an AI professor teach his course, that's great, but if none of the students want that, then so that's why we have to have this complete comprehensive view. All right. So, but what I want to focus on today is like what's the pain point we're solving? This is the core concept, right? What do we think is going to help each person on that list? And the tool I have here is called the value proposition canvas. So for each one, kind of list out who's your customer. First, I start, what is their job? Right? So let's just take one. All right, so let's just take one example. What is in this AI professor role? What is their job? What is your job?
The word.
A learner. Boom. Learn. Okay. So after that, we say, all right, your job is to learn. To make this a product that you're going to use, I either have to provide a game or solve a pain. What does that mean? Again, it's going to be small font, I'll send it to you. A pain is what do you find too costly? What makes you feel bad? What part of your existing solution is underperforming? What are the main difficulties and challenges that you're currently facing? What are some of the negative social consequences of the current product? What risks do you fear? A game could be what savings could make you happy? What outcomes would you expect and go above and beyond your expectations? And how does your current solution delight or not delight? What can we do to make your job easier? What are some positive outcomes of this, etc. So when we focus on this, we want to know that we're solving a problem or creating something with value. So we follow this and say, what is your job? Your solution. What are you guys? You guys are the customer. What's the aim? You have to name for the people. Okay. This is important, right? This everybody starts this exercise and they always say, oh, the professor why? Why does it take
One of them goes too fast, the other one expects the stuff that we didn't in last semester.
okay, all right. Couple concepts. One, right? Too fast. One, unreasonable expectations, right? Okay. We talk about speed. We talk about expectations, right? Learning style. Again, learning style. Learning style, right? Learning style, teaching style, don't match. Okay. Barriers. Yeah. Barriers. This is trying to be a great example because we have a classroom like okay. Anything else? What's the worst request we had? What made him our this class I've done it anymore. Time of day.
They have personal problems with you.
Yeah, personalization. What about ever?
Oh, like availability. Other office hours with it.
Yeah. Time of day, availability.
Everyone not being organized well enough, not like being all over the place.
Organized. I bring this up because when you think about what is the pain, and this always happens. And so the course I teach, we do this 5 hours over 15 weeks. And the students will go and they'll interview customers and they'll come back and they'll say they don't like their price solution. Why? It sucks. Okay, that's not helpful. Why is it not helpful? Because you can't create a solution around that sucks, right? Well, why does it suck? Because Well, here's the pain points. The only time they want to teach it is 7 a.m. Who wants to take that class? When they get in there, they're talking too fast. And by the way, they expect you to remember every single thing from you. They won't recap what it was. By the way, I don't like to agree with you because what they communicate doesn't have to be the way I learn it. Maybe part of that is because they're going they speak math, I speak English, right? So, and then he or she just has a personal thing that they get. Hey, great, and then following classic, there's different organizations about. I'm very organized, methodical. He or she is very chaotic. It doesn't work well. Okay. So, ooh, this is great. You can already think about how a robot is helpful, right? Okay. That's the point. Is not like I don't want to get too focused on like our robot, right? The focus was we first had to identify who we're solving for. Then we identify what are their true pain points or true value drivers that we can provide them, the gains that we can provide them. And then we'll go find a solution to solve it. All right, let's take another one. All right, one more time. Take something totally different. How about future employers? Okay. Totally different. What are some, it doesn't have to be a pain point, it could be something that they want for. What does a key buy for them that we find more value for them? Or what is a crypto? What do you think a future employer? Just off on their shoes. I already know.
Congruency. I was gonna say congruency.
Okay.
Everybody can talk the same way.
Maybe, so when we think it's when you say that it's like ensuring that everyone comes away with like the same skill set. Okay, we're gonna say skill sets. And here, yeah, I feel like applications, whatever the job is. Okay, practical application. We want to know exactly what we're learning, and everyone has the same skills, and we want to be.
It's kind of based off that, like recruiting strategy.
Okay.
You become someone who's comfortable learning from robots. Maybe.
Say one more time. It's a good one.
You become someone who's comfortable learning from AI or robots.
Yeah, that's important, right? That could be another deal breaker, right? Your students prefer learning from robots to get into the real world of people. That, right? So familiarity with learning from robots. This one's important because for the first time, these were all like, this is going to be better because it's going to solve all these. Then we look at this and we think, okay, it can be better because it's more uniform, it's more practical. Oh, wait a minute though. What happens if that student is just too used to having everything customized for them and they can't? You guys can't react in the real world when your peer is not a robot, it's an actual person. Okay, interesting now. We started to think through some possible deal breakers, right? Okay, any other thoughts?
I think it could also like save time and money and also let other like research institutions focus more on like the research or innovation and things like that.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna just kind of put another bucket over here, time and money. I'm gonna put kind of more towards the university. Okay, let's come back to this, right? Again, it's not about the robot equipment. It doesn't matter. We could have done this. The previous example I would use is like a robot like chef, right? It doesn't matter. The point is, again, we got the feedback. Professors stuck. Well, why did they suck? That's lesson number one. Dig deeper. Okay, you cannot provide a solution if you don't have real meaty details. right? So you gotta dig deeper and figure out why does the professor say. Lesson number 2, think about this from a holistic view. You can't just solve for one beneficiary, you have to solve for everybody. Ooh, by the way, something already popped up. Maybe I don't like this, right? And what happens if this becomes the #1 issue with the employer, right? Again, we go back to maybe the students like it because it's a better experience, maybe the university likes it because they don't pay me and other people. But then the employers are like, we're not going to hire them anymore because these students don't know how to interact in the real world, right? So already we're seeing why we do this, right? Because when we do this, we get the full view and we start to uncover things that might go wrong. Okay. All right. All right. So let's talk now. Why does that, where do you go from there? Where do you go from there? Right.
You reform your original idea.
Yes. Right. So we reform our original idea. Maybe we start to think, ooh, all right, this is becoming a big issue. And maybe we identify like this one right here, learning and teaching styles is like so important, right? On one hand, this helps us because we could say, you know what, we need in our robot professor, we need to incorporate different styles of teaching. Maybe they use more examples, maybe they use more formulas, maybe they write more, maybe they talk more. Boom, super helpful. We're going to customize the robot even more, right? Great. On the downside, we start to think of our blocker right here, right? So then we go back, iterate. Boom. Why we're here today is because the old way of thinking would be like, we spend a year in a lab, we create the best robot, we go about, we launch it, and then, oh crap, the employers don't want to employ us anymore because we're too good work with the robot, then your whole idea goes down the drain. But now we start to iterate. Okay, we heard you. You don't want us, you don't want us as students to be robots. I got it. Okay, we can start to think about that. We don't have to come up with a solution now, but the whole point is you start to iterate now, right? In this phase. And so that's this part of the template here. It's all right. So we know the gains, we know the pains. We're going to do this for each one of the beneficiaries. So we're going through, you're going to talk for each one. What does the university want? What do the administrators want, etc. Right? All right. Then we say, okay, from there, what can we do to solve that pain? We already talked about, all right, we want different learning styles, we can incorporate that. What can we do to create that gain? So say that the future employer says, you know what, I would love for people to keep learning more practical skills, not just textbook skills. Great. In the robot, it would be give us a gain, it would make the learning experience even better if you could apply this calculus to real world examples. Great, we'll program that into our learning algorithm. Okay, so all right, we've already uncovered the pain from the students, the gain from the employers, and then we uncovered a possible blocker, right? So then we can start to think, all right, how could we solve this problem? We don't have to solve it right now. The point is we can take this and start to iterate now in our idea phase, right? Okay.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
before you move further? What happens if you don't have access to the stakeholders to ask them what are your pains? Do you just imagine?
No, definitely not. You gotta find access. You gotta find access. Like that's the second half of work we're going to say. You gotta get out there and find them. And whether that's just knocking on doors, cold calling people. And so that's one thing that we focus on, like in my courses. The hardest part is actually just getting in front of these stakeholders. That's the hardest part. And people think so much of it's like the hard part is coming up with an idea. It's not. The hard part is testing your idea. First, I gotta find somebody that would be a future user, get in front of them, then I gotta talk to them, and then I have to extract meaningful information out of them that will help me. And that's the hardest part.
I've heard a lot about ChatGPT. I never used it, but is it possible to maybe ask these questions on my robot?
Yes, good. By the way, I know other professors say don't use ChatGPT. I think everyone should use ChatGPT for you. You can actually just there's watch you right now from ChatGPT. Right, I think so. Yes, but again, I don't want to get too focused on the idea. Yeah. By the way, if anybody that you know missed today's, they can just go type in these concepts in the ChatGPT and boom, 30 minutes you can cover the 5 hours.
Yeah, just a kind of general question. So like, we talked about how, you know, the goal would be that each of these entities, like, you know, give a check that comes up to our idea. But isn't like the kind of idea of like tech, just like disrupt or something, that like one of those entities is gonna hate the idea?
Yes. Yes, okay, that's key. What happens if somebody doesn't like your idea? What happens if you can't solve this? Right? What happens if you solve each one of these and you're just like, I can't figure this last part out? That's why it's not science, and that's why it's entrepreneurship. That is the hardest part about moving to the next phase, is what's the most important thing to solve?
I have a question.
Yes.
Like you said, like the testing phase is the hardest part, right? Like getting, I guess my question is, if you have a product, for example, and first you have to create your product, you have to get funding to manufacture it or research it,
Okay, keep going.
right? But like you have iterations and that requires a lot of time, a lot of resources.
Yeah.
But you know, like in the case where you're not like Airbnb and you have a clever idea to like use professional photos to get people to use your product, how do you survive, you know, just designing, and how do you, I guess, I feel like it's very hard to break through the testing phase and get your product out there.
Do you want to share your product or?
No.
All right, let's take an example, right? Like, say you're manufacturing. People would say, well, say I'm manufacturing, like the next UH water bottle that keeps my beverage not just cold, but perfectly the right temperature, and it's super lightweight and durable, and it's going to be the best water bottle of all time. Great. And I have to manufacture it, right? Okay. But I mean, you could think about ways to test into that, right? So, I mean, one of the things that's going to be a big problem is, do people want that? Yes, of course people want that, right? What's going to be the blocker though? Who wouldn't want the perfect water bottle that keeps your ice water at perfect temperature all day and never breaks? Well, why would I not buy that?
You already have a water bottle.
Maybe.
Not like the
I think
biggest
water bottle.
need.
Hmm?
Not like the biggest need, not a lot of.
Maybe.
Cost.
Cost. The biggest issue, how much are you gonna pay for that? Right, what's one way you can test that right now?
Yes,
Everybody does this, but survey, boom, that's one.
Provide like free samples or something.
Free samples. You know what the way people do that now? They put an ad out right now. Next gen water bottle stays at 50 degrees for 30 hours, indestructible, cost of $30. They launch another ad. Boom, 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 the cost is $60. They launch another ad, cost is $100. Click here to get on the waiting list. Right? This is a classic way people do this now. Then they test their way into it. By the way, and then you find out, okay, everyone wants this, but they're only willing to pay $30. Then when you go to manufacturing, you better get that price under $30, right? Who does this, by the way? Who does this right now? All the time.
Theranos.
Theranos, kind of, yes, not so much. Who does this in a
Airbnb.
non-illegal way?
Kickstarter.
Elon Musk does this all the time. When did you hear about the Tesla truck? I heard about 3 years. My brother-in-law put his money down 3 years ago to get a Tesla truck. Does he have the Tesla truck? No. Did they have anything? They did not have anything. What did Elon Musk start taking orders for last year? The Tesla robot. Do you think that Tesla robot's coming out in the next 3 years? No. What is he doing? He's like, here's a concept. You want to sign up for it, put $1,000 down. Come back 1 second, right? Right. So, like, this people do this all the time, right? I'm not saying he needs to test his ideas. He knows people are going to buy the Tesla truck, right? But my point is, like, he's front loading the demand to see like how much demand there is. Are you willing to put down a city now? And so that's one risk from your idea. Are people willing to pay for it? You can test into that right now. Another one is like, can you even manufacture it, right? Like, let's just say it's a manufacturing idea. Like, can I even do that, right? Okay, let's go out. And you know, I think the thing here is like the opposite way is common is like you're just gonna go out, I got 1,000 orders. You can make it for me, right? Do you have those 1,000 orders? And then you go, right? But the point is, if you can make it, I'll sell it, right? That's the other way to do it, right? But my point is, it's not about like my water bottle example or the Tesla truck example. My point is, you have to find a way to to break it down into smaller pieces that you can test.
Okay.
It is hard, I'm not saying. it's easy here.
Is there a specific name for all that you just talked about, that strategy of upping the price?
That's like price discovery, but the specific strategy is really just. No, I don't know if there's a specific name to it, I don't know, it's a good question, I didn't think about that. Sorry, yes, you had a question.
Can you kind of elaborate on that process that you just described for a product, but in the form of the service?
Yeah, okay, great, like.
Like
Do you want to
Lyft,
share your service, or you want-
can you just use like Lyft as an example?
Okay, so like. Perfect, right? Well, Airbnb, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Their services, Lyft, Uber, right? So how could you do this, right? What's their main problem you started? You have drivers and you have riders,
People trying to get from place to place.
right? Or I think you just don't have a match. A common service, this is a marketplace service, right? But a common problem with a marketplace is you have too much on one side and not enough on the other.
Okay.
Right? So again, well, let's think about it together. Let's just take your Lyft, and this is 10 years ago. I will provide rides for you. All you have to do is sign up for this app. Right? Which side do we want to test first? You want to test the drivers? Or you want to test the?
Probably the drivers.
Okay, so we want to test it, see if drivers will come. How could we test that?
Search for demand. Search for, I don't know if it's
Yeah.
a demand or a provider or.
Yeah, so say we want to see both drivers sign up to do this, right? We think the biggest problem is we can't get drivers. Right? We do the same thing. Hey, we're paying, here's an opportunity to make $50 an hour driving your own car. You want to do it? Here's a landing. This is a very common Silicon Valley thing to do. It's like, here's a landing page. This landing page tells you exactly what you got to do, tells you everything. Sign up here and you'll go on the wait list. Oh, by the way, is this really a service? No, but by the time I wait this, trust me, I worked at startups that do this. We create the product on a landing page, it describes it, get to the waiting list. Once the waiting list gets to X number of people, then we'll go build it. Right? By the way, we do have the other side too, right? New apps coming out, get a ride wherever you want for X dollars, at the palm of your hand, sign up for the service, right? You sign up, when you start to like line up enough on both sides, and you create the marketplace.
What if nobody signs up?
Then you better figure out why. Because this is why we do this, right? Because if you launch it, nobody signed up, you would have wasted months and hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But now you can just test it and pretend that it's there. Have a landing page that says, here's exactly what you're going to get, sign up for the wait list, and you can see the demand right there. Sorry, there's another question. I simplify it like, yes, number one, sometimes it's hard to figure out how to break your idea in chunks that you can test. It could be hard. I get that, right? Number two, even if you kind of figure out a way to break it out into chunks, it's kind of hard to figure out like how to extract the right information to prove that it works for everyone. And sometimes it's hard. I'm not saying that.
Right, so I just want to share something real quick.
Yeah.
The whole concept is called doing things that don't scale.
Yeah.
And if you search that on like YouTube, you guys will find like a really cool story about that, like doing things that don't scale initially, like how Airbnb talked to all these hosts in person and all of that. Yeah, so like if you guys are all interested in that, to do things that don't scale on YouTube and you see all these cool stuff.
Cool. I love it. Love it. Love it. I mean, I think the goal here is also, again, it's a framework, right? Like, is it going to be easy to apply? It's going to be hard. But hopefully it gives you the tools to think about it in a different way. All right. Any other questions here? All right, a couple of last thoughts on this and we'll go to a break. But it is real. Like I give the Elon Musk example, like he does this all the time. Right. I have one friend doing this right now. He wants to launch an AI product. So he has a couple ideas. So he launched 10 different concepts. He creates a web page, he creates a mock-up of an app, and he's doing exactly this. He just pays for $1,000 worth of Facebook ads, Google Ads, has people sign up, and the way he's gonna pick his startup is whoever gets the most sign up.
How do you decide when it's, or how do you know when it's time to like apply for a patent
Ooh,
for like your design?
we'll talk about one-on-one, because that's very bespoke. Patents are, number one, it's very specific to you, what you're doing. Number two, people have different philosophies. So, like Elon Musk is classic. He doesn't believe in patents. He said patents are people that don't innovate fast enough. That just means you're too slow and people will catch up to you. I would have, there's no right answer. There's no one answer. Yeah.
I was gonna just like quickly answer that there's a way that you can do provisional patent, that it's like really efficient and simple. It costs like next to no money, and you can like do it yourself pretty much if you research it well enough, and that gives you, I think it's like a year or so, and then you can extend it. Meaning that you're essentially like saying, I'm setting up for a potential patent, but I don't want to spend all this money and all this time, but then it still secures you, so that could be like pretty good.
And I talk about the patent thing, like it's very specific, because I'm also of the mind, I'm also of the mindset, like I'm not a huge believer in patents. It's more from me, it's because a lot of people spend time. It's the same thing on legal structures. A lot of people come talk to me like a lot of questions on legal structures. I just don't know that much. I don't. For me, it's like, let's just focus on this, that people want the product, right? It's more of a personal bias, I will know. All right, let's take a break. Then we come back like 10, 25, 20 minutes, like 10, 25, 10, 30-ish.
With the internship, leadership and vouchers.
All right, can we get going? You guys see anybody? Okay, so there was, I thought there was one really good question about like, hey, I need, can I show your idea?
Yeah.
Okay, so Amy was talking about like her concept is nursing homes, right? And she's like, how do I test that? But that's a good point, right? Because when we're talking about this, sometimes you're not necessarily testing a concept, right? You could say the same thing on like, you know, maybe I'm going to start a business like a repair shop or a general contractor. Like, you know that the demand is there and the common service and whatnot, but that doesn't mean this is not helpful or not useful. No, because you still have to figure out what are you going to charge? Like, what's going to make your service last versus other services that are out there, right? And so I would use the concept here of customer discovery less on like, do people want my concept, right? It's more of how can I make that a lasting concept? What is the existing pain point of in this example, like the nursing home owners that are already out there? What's the pain points of the workers that work at the nursing homes that are already out there? And how do I make that better so that my version of this will last, right? So I think we focus a lot on testing, testing a concept and see if it will work, but this is not necessarily just about figuring out if you have something that people will want. It's also, well, how do I make this into a lasting business? How do I make sure it's better than what's already out there, right? So I don't want to focus too much on just like new ideas that we're not sure people want them, and how do I figure out if there's demand? It's also, I know there's demand, but how do I price it correctly? How do I make sure that I can find people to work there? How do I make sure that it's going to be better than the competitor down the street? You can use the same concepts, right? Any other questions before I move on about what we learned so far? Okay. All right. With this guy, but the whole video, 1999. It's Bezos, right? Man, my opinion, the greatest entrepreneur of our time. Okay, so it's very similar concept to what we talked about before. Listen to what he does.
But I believe that if you can focus obsessively on customer experience, selection, ease of use, low prices, more information to make purchase decisions with, if you can give customers all that, plus great customer service, and with our toys and electronics, we have a 30-day return policy. If you can do all of that, I think you have a good chance. And that's what we're trying to do. You're a company.
anymore either. I mean, we've got millions of square feet now of real estate, of growing, huge and growing inventory of items.
Whatever.
We've got thousands and thousands of employees.
Yeah, we have over 3,000 employees and over 4 million square feet of distribution center space. And those are things I'm very, very proud of, because with that distribution center space and half a dozen distribution centers around the country allows us to get product close to customers so that we can ship it to customers in a very timely way, which improves customer service levels. That's what we're about. If there's one thing that Amazon.com is about, it's obsessive attention to customer experience end to end. And that's what those distribution
But they're
centers
not here.
it doesn't, it doesn't matter to me whether we're pure or what matters to me is we provide the best customer service. Internet, schminternet, it's that's, that doesn't matter.
Well, but it does matter to your investors, whether they're investing in a company that.
They should be investing in a company that obsesses over customer experience. In the long term, there's never any misalignment between customer interests and shareholder interests.
Well, that's the same argument that somebody at Walmart would make as well.
I don't see why not. I think they should make them.
So,
It's a correct argument.
okay, so you'll open as many square feet of space, physical space, but you have to hire as many employees as you have to.
To serve the customer, absolutely. And we do it as rapidly as we can.
That's a very,
And I love that because it's outdated, but it's so relevant, right? So here is the beginning days of Amazon, now $1 trillion company, and the interviewees kind of. The interviewees. Okay, the interviewees trying to nail it down on like, are you an internet company or are you like a Walmart? Like, it doesn't matter. What's the answer? We're a customer company. And if you know anybody that works at Amazon right now and you ask them right now, what is the #1 value of Amazon? They will say right now, customer obsession. Right, 25 years later, they still say the same thing, right? And when it came out, everyone's like, well, cool, you sell books. Like, that makes sense. Going back to this example we just talked about, like, do you think there's a demand to buy cheaper books online? Yeah, sure, people want that, right? But he's saying that doesn't matter. The point is, what does the customer want? I will find that for you and I will build that, right? And that's exactly what we're talking about today. And I think this is another example that he's not focused on like, does my idea work? Am I gonna be the next internet company? Am I gonna be the next Walmart? So what does the customer want? I will go find that for them. We'll build that for them. Okay? And I love it now because 25 years later, we saw that, yeah, the customer loved books. Awesome. Oh yeah, by the way, they also want to buy electronics. By the way, they want to buy everything online. By the way, they just want everything cheaper. That's his mission. It's like, all right, you're gonna do data storage and data cloud storage. All right, great. Whatever it is, like we're gonna do this now, right? So the point is like, here's the biggest company or like #3 biggest company in the world. 20 years later, and it's still the same value on what does the customer want? I will go find them, right? And I love that too, because I talked about at the beginning that there's kind of two styles, right? Like if you listen to Steve Jobs interview, he would never say that. He would never say that. He's just like, well, I'll tell you what you want, right? I will build it and you will want it after I build it, right? Jeff Bezos is the opposite. It's just it's incredible for 25 years, he's never deviated from his core statement. Doesn't matter, none of all these categories matter. Whatever the customer wants, I will do that, right? So I just love that because that's what we're talking about today, right? Okay, all right. And if you understand a customer, you can go from 1999 to Bezos to 2022 Jeff Bezos.
older before.
Understand your customer and you will be. All right, so we do all that, and we talk about all that, and that's all in service of figuring out what are our ideas, how to make our idea the best idea, etc. Right? So the next concept I want to talk about is what is an MVP? Has anybody heard this term before? Minimum viable product, right? Okay. So the minimum viable product, we're going to listen to a short clip on what it means, but it's kind of the next evolution of this process. Okay, I go out, I understand the general space I want to work in our example, I want to help make educate better with AI, great, okay, awesome. I think maybe it's gonna be an AI professor, maybe it's gonna go want that. Then I interview a bunch of beneficiaries and stakeholders, I figure out what the pain points are, I think I can solve those, great. Now what? Now what would you do? Right? So again, we go back to the traditional way of thinking, all right, now I'm gonna go greatest AI professor ever using this input. But the core question is like, well, how do you not create like an installation? How do you create the next version, the first version of that? And the question again, what is the first version of that? Well, the first version of that in our definition is the minimum viable product. The minimum viable product is what is that minimum thing you need to get feedback to know if your idea works, right? So let's hear what have you right, talk about this. So this is this guy Michael Siegel. He is he was the co-founder of Twitch, I think a lot of you probably use. And then he teaches a bunch of stuff at Y Combinator, which is like one of the most famous incubators in Silicon Valley. But here he's talking about what is
In most cases, most people should be building a very lean MVP. So by that we mean you should be able to build it fast in weeks, not months. This can either involve software or honestly, we see startups that start with a landing page and a spreadsheet. But most startups can start very, very fast. The second, extremely limited functionality. You need to condense down what your user needs, what your initial user needs, to a very simple set of things. A lot of times founders want to address all of their users' problems and all of their potential users. When in reality, they should just focus on a small set of initial users and their highest order problems, and then ignore the rest until later. You should have a vision of everyone. You should have an MVP very small. All this is a base to iterate from. That's it. It's just the starting point. It's not special in any way. You just have to start. And so please make sure you don't feel like your MVP is too special. Okay, here is a classic example. This is one of Airbnb's first landing pages in 2008, I believe. One of the things that you might be interested about in Airbnb's first product is that there were no payments. When you found a place to stay on Airbnb, you had to exchange money with the host in person. Needless to say, that was a pretty big problem, but they started without payments. No map view. You know how when you search Airbnb, you can see where the house is in the city? You don't have that, sorry. And the person writing all the code, Nate, was working part-time. Okay, so everyone tells these kind of magical stories about how everything was perfect from the beginning. Airbnb, not perfect from the beginning. Next one, Twitch. This was what Twitch looks like day one. Not very familiar. Well, maybe a little familiar. There's some video there and there's some chat there. Other than that, nothing else. Twitch launched as Justin TV, which was an online reality TV show. There was only one channel, Justin. You had to follow his life. If you didn't like his life, you had to leave the website. That's all there was. The video was extremely low resolution. It was funny. A founder asked me back in the day, like, oh, like, wasn't it weird you guys had video in your apartment? Weren't there all these like secret documents and things that like people would be able to see? And it's like, you could barely recognize our faces, let alone documents that we had. And most importantly, there were no video games. No video games, except if we decided to play video games in our apartment. Like that was the only time video games ever appeared. And so we would say you can do that quickly.
Right, so he's talking about this, right? So we want to start iterate quickly, right? So let's take our example here. Right? Go. Okay. There you go. All right. So let's take our example here, right? He said a few core things, right? It should be the smallest thing. We're going to iterate and work our way in there. He also said a really important thing. All your beneficiaries, don't solve for all of them. Just pick one. Because you got to be good at something to somebody. It's one of the important things there. to new product developers, be great at something to someone first before you start worrying about everybody else, right? Not to say we're gonna ignore that, but let's just start with one, right? He's not saying like all we need to do is solve the student problem, saying just start with this first, okay? And then one thing he's just talking about speed, he's very specific, like what can you do in weeks, not months, right? I also gave an example at the beginning on the old school ways you would take months or years to develop. He's saying weeks, right? A lot of my friends I have, they think about what can I do in days, right? So like speed, don't waste time, right? So let's just say we take his example, right? We want to build our MVP. Actually, let's forget we're not building necessarily an AI professor. Let's just say we want to use AI to go back to the original idea to make education better. Right? We know the students, our customers, they want to have it at the time of day they want, at the speed and the learning style they want. They want to have more context and previous content that we learned in previous semesters. And they want to make sure that it's organized in the way that you guys want, right? So we know we're solving for you guys first, okay? So let's try what are MVP?
If it was me, I'll probably use, take all the teaching style that the students want, the expectations they have, put them as an input in ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
and then just present the output. That'll be the MVP.
Okay, so we're gonna take the most important things, right? Like learning style and expectations and language, and we're gonna put these into an existing platform. For those that are ChatGPT is an existing AI platform, right? So this is something where you feed it inputs and it'll create a whole script for you. Okay, so let's not, what you're saying is let's not create our own robot. Let's use a robot that already exists out there. We're gonna feed it these inputs and see what output it has. Great, okay.
And then you present to the students.
Who's gonna present it to the students? Is ChatGPT just give you text?
Well, the company that's doing this, it's gonna be like, well, we did this.
But who, like a person?
No, probably the website.
Okay. So let's get to that, right? So one thing, right? What we're saying here is that ideal solution would be like, I just sit down and I imagine what the ideal learning experience is and the robot will present it. What we're thinking here, well, the core is let's figure out what the student wants. In our world, we somehow identify these things, the most important things that the student wants. And instead of building an end solution, let's just get halfway there. Halfway there is let's create the best content. Let's not worry about who's presenting. Okay. So how do we get the best content? Let's find an existing tool that already works, create customized content that gives you the right background information, the right learning style, the right speed, and in a language that speaks to you, that resonates with you. Okay, so we've identified the core things, we've developed the best content out there, and we're not really going to deliver it. Maybe we just hire somebody and say, instead of building your own content, here, just read out the script I gave you. Maybe you just go to your
Well, the idea will be the founders, because they can get the actual reaction.
or maybe you can just go to your Math 241 professor and say, you suck. Read this script that is customized for students. And I know this works better because I've taken the inputs from them on what they want to see. And just don't read your script, read this script, right? But the core is, what are we doing, right? We're boiling it down. We've already started to say, we want to know what everybody wants, but we're just gonna solve for these people first. In this, we want to know what the content is, how it's delivered, what time of day, etc. Okay, we can't solve all this first, but let's just get the best content out there. How we're gonna do that? We're gonna use the existing tools. We're not gonna create our own tool. We're gonna go find a tool that will create the content for us, and we're just gonna change the content to be more custom. Then we can start to iterate. Great, students love that. Awesome, they love that. The content was so much better. It spoke to me in English and not math speak. It was at the right cadence. I loved it. Now what do you do?
Oh, get their feedback.
Get the feedback.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it. Best, I totally kind of like Math 241 is now my favorite class now. Now what do you do?
Iterate.
Iterate. How do we iterate? What do we do?
We'll get their feedback. I mean, I can't really
Yeah.
guess.
Okay,
their
let's say
feedback,
that
but
I love it. I want more of that. Right? Right?
that's the next problem.
Exactly. We go back to our stuff. What else can we solve? Oh, by the way, like I want it whenever I want it real time. You know, when I wake up at 3 a.m. and I want to take Math 241, I want it to be okay. How do we do that? Well, next thing you gotta do is get rid of the professor, right? Yeah. doesn't want to wake up at 3 a.m. Too bad, Jeff, you're out of a job, right? So now we know the inputs work, now we start to expand, right? The point is not, again, let's not get too anchored into this robot professor or whatever. The point is, we broke it, we understood what the pain points were, then we said, what is the most important one we should solve? We said to students, we went even more specific, not just who, but which one of these do we want to solve? And I think the core here is we didn't start to build ourselves. We said, what can we use that's already out there to try this out? Okay, we already have something we can use. It might not be perfect. We'll use an existing tool to just try that out. Great, that works. Another might be like, you know what? We, instead of using the existing platform, we can build our own AI platform that customizes the background information and learning style even more, right? Maybe it's customized to you and how you're feeling that day. I'm feeling happy, I want you to have a happy tone because I'm happy today. I'm feeling somber, I want you to have a more serious tone today. Whatever it is, right? So we can also start to iterate on, well, great, this worked, let's customize it even more, right? Or maybe you start to just go down the list of other people, right? The point is, we didn't try to solve everything, we just focused on one thing. Let's hear again. Next, thought from one thing, thought process, like it's the work.
When you think about MVP, you think about something ridiculously simple. This is the first thing you can give to the very first set of users you want to target in order to see if you can deliver any value at all to them. That's all it is. It's extremely simple. I know you guys had a talk last week about how to come up with ideas, how to come up with problems you want to solve. What I will tell you is that it is helpful to talk to some users before you decide to build your MVP. This doesn't mean you have to go into a 3-year kind of research situation, or you have to work in industry for 10 years. But some conversations are helpful. It's even more helpful if you're your own user, so you can tell whether your product's working for you.
Your own user.
I always get this strange question of how do I get my first users, which always kind of confuses me because theoretically you decide to solve a problem that you know someone has. So the way you get your first user is you talk to that person that you know has the problem. And if it's you, it's even easier. So if you are building a product for a mysterious set of users that you have no idea who they are, question that slightly, very slightly.
Man, it's talking about all the stuff we talked about today, right? So who you're building for, you better know who you're building for. I mean, we asked all these questions. How do I talk to you? I don't know who to talk to. Well, pretty simple. Pretty simple. Like if you don't know the problem you're solving, then you don't know who your user is, then you want to talk to. If you know the problem you're solving, you know you thought about the pain points, and you go talk to those people, right? So, but the core of what it's saying again is simplicity. It goes back to like slide number 1, like speed. We want to iterate quickly. We don't want to sit there and plan it forever. We want to just get an idea. How do we iterate quickly? We start to talk to people. It's just the same lessons to come up already. Talk to people, move quick, iterate, just keep reinventing, right? All right, so. I'm gonna come back to this. Yeah, I'm gonna come back to this. All right. Thoughts. What does everyone think about this concept of an MVP? Questions? 2 minutes. Someone's got to be out there saying, I can't create an MVP for my product. I'm sure one of you is thinking this right now. There's no way.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to share your concept?
It's a location-based social media app. It's like a very, very basic concept.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know how to make an MVP of that, you know.
Okay, so I think it goes. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be hard to just live, but I go back to the example that a lot of people have shared, right? Like he's talking about part of your MVP is how do you strip down like the most basic function to like what is the core problem you're solving? So we go back to this Airbnb example, right?
Yeah.
Because what was Airbnb at the beginning? There was no map, gonna put a credit card in, it was simply a list of apartments and a list of people that wanted apartments, and that was it. That was it, right? And so what he's saying here is, I'm solving for, I know my beneficiaries are solving for apartment owners and apartment seekers or vacation seekers, and how do I just match them? That's all I'm trying to do, is just match, right? So I guess the core is like, the core question is like, what is the core functionality that will solve your core users' core need? Or if it's not a need, what's the gain that you're going to provide them that's going to be better than an existing app, right? And so we'll talk about it like a little bit more one-on-one, but the thing is like, first start with the same principles, like who am I solving for? Who's the number one person you're solving for? What do you think their number one pain point is? And how do I make the most basic app that solves that one pain point, right? And so I go back to, if you think of social media examples, right? So I was on the team at Instagram, I led the team. You guys all know like Instagram makes billions of dollars now, right? So I ran the team that started ads for Instagram. So when I went, there was no ads. And the first job I had was like, make money, create some ads on it, right? So same thing, we went out and interviewed 100 businesses. We said, what would make you advertise here? What would help you do this, whatever. And so the dirty secret was most of them were already on Facebook advertising. And what we found was they're just like, I don't want to do any extra work. And so what we tried to boil it down to was, okay, what happens if we had this tool, or what happens if we had this, or we had this, we knew for sure you were making money, whatever. But the number one secret thing they said was, if you could just make it, I could just click a button and all the ads I put on Facebook just moved over to Instagram, that would be better. So, okay, like we could do that right now, right? And so I get that point being like, sometimes there's like a simplicity on like, what is that core feature? Like, is that something that you want forever? Like, no, like that's not the end solution. But right now, like, what is that core feature that you can test, right? That's an example. Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
Is that a location-based social media, social
Yeah.
network?
Yeah.
Maybe test it in make a minimal viable product for a location like a university. Would that be possible? With fewer people, but in a limited location, like.
I mean, part of it too is like maybe the we'll talk about this, but maybe usually what people will do in this, it's like what's hard technically and how can I just do this manually, right? So if I, classic example is like, all right, there's no location-based matching. I'm just matching you physically on the back end or whatever, just sitting there like matching people. Like you're here, you should be. There's no technology behind it. That is like a classic way to do it. It's like, let's not build any infrastructure. Let's just find people and connect them manually. That is like one concept where you're just not building anything. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? All right. Next concept is what I want to think about is what's my market, right? The reason I think about this is, okay, we know we have a general concept, we want to bring artificial intelligence to education. We thought about all the people, we narrowed it down to the most important stakeholder, we narrowed it down to the most important needs, right? But at the same time, you have to have this vision of like, will this matter in the end? Right? Will this matter in the end? And so I think the concept here is like, what's your market size though? People talk about this a lot. And I think the hard part about this is when you think about market size, people always get it wrong because they'll say, we'll use our example, but they'll usually give something that's like either too broad or too specific, right? So we'll go through it and figure it out. But I think the total, the market size, what is your total market demand for your product or service? What if every single person who could potentially find value in that product? That's key. Has to be somebody that would potentially find value in that product. What happens if all of them would use it? How big would that market be? And what is the overall like revenue or user base size for that specific product or service? Okay. Why does that matter though? Right, because it's the opposite of what we did here. We said, let's narrow it down to the most specific user, the most specific problem. But at the end of the day, we also have to have this understanding of well, like, why am I solving this problem yet? Because you don't want to also get too narrow, and then you found out like, oh, actually, this only works for students that are remote learning in foreign countries where the university is in another country and another time zone. Like, okay, well, now we got such a specific use case, like, am I gonna be able to really solve that and make money out of that? Part of this is like, okay, now that you know specifically what you're solving for, how big is that market? Is this worth us, worth our time, right? It's worth our time. So that's something that is important because we want to make sure that we're not building too narrowly specifically. So let's think about this. Who in our example, of an AI robot professor, like who do we think our market size is in our market size, our target market? Let's talk about students.
I would say it could be international. It could be like scaled internationally, affect the students and students at universities.
So international students. Or are you saying global, all students?
Yeah.
All students, okay, let's get more specific, all students. Right, let's start off, any student international, okay, global students. But my push there would be, yes, that sounds great, but would every single student potentially find value in an AI robot professor? What's one way to start to narrow it down?
Students who are like on SAS have to career professors?
Yeah, so students that want change, right? Students that lack like great professors. Okay. What else we need? Yeah.
Students that have a busy lifestyle where
Students that lack time. Right, maybe it's these students, some of you might be working full-time jobs, right? Okay.
Students who don't have a way to get to the class or
Yep.
online students, solely online students.
Lack access to in person, right? Sorry, anything else?
Students with a bad GPA.
Okay. Students, well, maybe broad now, but students who need to improve their performance.
Possibly low income families,
And students that lack resources, right?
yeah.
Lack income. Resources, right? Income, dollars. You want the best professors. Can't afford that for your student education.
students that aren't like suffering from a digital divide.
Okay. What is your digital? Capabilities, your digital access. Okay. All right. So, okay, last one.
Question, because like, you seem to be focusing definitely on the student, but the students. But it seems that it's not so different than like online courses available that are free already, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like looking at this and it's like, well, as a student, it's no different for me. Like if this AI generated one versus having like the best professors in the world teaching something. So I'm trying to get like trying to understand like more of like what benefit is this going to provide to a student over like what the yeah.
I think we narrowed it down right there. We narrowed it down right there. So let's first talk about, there's two concepts you're actually talking about. One, I'm talking about who is our target market. And you're talking about also like what differentiates our product from the existing product, and the existing product is online learning, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to put myself in the students' like position too.
Yep.
And like, why would I choose one over another?
Yeah, but there's two topics though, right? But I think let's focus on this. You could easily say the target market is not global students. The target market is students that are already on online learning, right? Because they're used to remote learning, they're used to like a little bit of digital studying, etc. Right? You could argue that all of you prefer the in-person setting, human touch, you prefer the connection, right? And so the folks that choose an online setting would be the same folks that would choose an AI setting. Totally, that makes sense. So already there, the main point of this is like when I think about how big is the market? You want to make sure you understand, like, is there enough value there where you can have, you know, customers to make it worth your while? And if I said to you, all global students, like, oh, yes, that is awesome. Like, I could definitely service every single student in the world, and that would make hundreds of millions of dollars. Great. Well, actually, not really, not really. Some of you want an in-person experience. You want to go talk to your professor. Okay, all right. So you're starting to knock that down, right? Some of you really, you guys are all full, a lot of you are full time, right? Well, I've got all the time in the world. I don't need to necessarily do this in the middle of the night. I have access. I'm here. Professors are here. I have access in person. Start to narrow it down. The more eloquent way of saying is there's already a market there. There's already a market. It's people that do remote learning, virtual settings. Now we're just going to switch up who that professor is, right? The core of it though is like to understand like how many people you can solve for. That's what I'm trying to understand. Okay. Why is that important? It's important. Let's take Amy's example, right? She's talking about like a nursing home, right? Maybe she's saying, my core concept is I'm going to be the best nursing home in the North Shore. Okay, awesome. That's great. Are there enough people there? Would people travel from the other side of the island to go to your facility? I'm not sure. Maybe not. Depends on what your value prop is, right? Your value prop is I'm the only one here in this neighborhood. Great. You already know what your problem is. You're solving a location problem. Then you start to say like, well, my market is very clear. It's people in a 10-mile radius. Then you start to calculate it. Well, how many people are above 75 years old in a 10-mile radius? There's only 10 of them. Better find a better market then, right? So I just the reason I say this is because when we start to focus on solving a specific problem, sometimes we get too specific and you forget to broaden up and this is worth the time. Okay, so let's go back to the other question though on like, why is this different from like what's already out there, right? Yeah, again, it's not over. I bring this example. I don't know if this is about business. Maybe it's not, right? But the point is, how would you solve that problem? Or how would you answer that question, I should say? Your question is this better than online universities? I put it right back on you. Is this better than online universities? How would you answer that question?
I don't know enough about the idea, but
It'd be cheaper.
Maybe cheaper, right? Maybe.
More customized, like you're saying, like you.
No, but my main point is not how do you solve it, but like how would you even figure out the answer?
Oh, research, they go out there and ask
People.
Yes.
Now, boom, go back to this. Who are you talking to?
Students.
What students?
The ones that currently have a problem.
Which one are those? Students on online university. Why would you, if your thesis is my market is students that are already learning online, does it make sense to come here and talk to the students that are in 4-year in-person? No, you're saying I'm not solving their problem. Then you already narrowed it down to online students. There are points I love to talk to, right?
And how would you narrow that down again? Like, how do we get to that specifically?
Well, so in her example, she had the great insight of like maybe in our example, the market is not all universities, it's universities that are already online, and you're basically replacing that online professor with a bot, right? And so what I'm saying is great, then there's no point in talking to all students, there's no point in talking to your classmates here that are in person. Let's go find them online students.
I guess my question is, how do we get to the conclusion that our market is only online?
There's in this case where we jump to that conclusion, right? But to your point, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. Because this is the crux. A lot of what we're doing here is we're solving this problem with like theoretical data. Okay, let's come back to that, right? Okay. That is great time. Let's see. Okay. So this question right here. We learned about what some of the problems, how do we figure out what problem we're solving. We learned about who our customers or beneficiaries are. We learned about are there enough of them. We learned about how do we know how to create value prop. Now, right? So this is the crux, this is a great segue, because all this, we just did this with make-believe data. Well, it's not really make-believe data, because you guys are also custom, right? But for the most part, this is just a make-believe example, right? I don't know if we can create an AI professor, doesn't it? How do I know? We just made this up this morning, right? So this is all just. This is just an academic exercise today, right? But how do we make it into a real life exercise? That will solve your social media problem, that will solve your nursing media problem, that will solve whatever problem that you're here today to talk about. How do we turn this from theoretical data into real data? How do we solve her question on like, how do we know students even want this? Maybe it's just online. I don't know. What's next? So now's the point of the day when we switch from theory to real life. Talk to people, right? So one of the things that was maybe not the best way to do this is we came up with our own answers all day, just in our minds. And it's just garbage because we just came up with that. In reality, you want to go find the real data, and the real data you got to have conversations. But that's what we're working on the second half of this class. Right? Now, I also want to talk about that because, like, all right, we've been doing this for 2 hours now. We've got another 2 hours. Wait a minute, we're going to spend 2 hours learning concept and then whole 2 hours just learning about how to talk to customers. Yeah, because that's what I think is the major gap. And what everyone does is they focus just too much on like I can figure out my answers in my head. And so let's get down to it now. It's like, how do we get there and talk to customers? Okay. Questions about the concepts. We're gonna get down to customer discovery.
I don't know if this is too related to my project, but let's say that I have customers and all of that lined up, but the technology that I'm developing could be applicable to other domains. Do I have the, you were saying like if 100% of users would be using, who would that be? So potentially it could be anybody, but my prototype and the thing that I'm working on is just for this population to show the proof of concept. So how do I address it? Do I address it as a technology for higher education, or do you address it as a technology that with knowledge management for everybody?
Great. So can I share your concept real quick? Okay, so she has a concept about it's essentially helping like network and sharing knowledge amongst PhD and research students, right? Okay, so this is a great example. It's like, well, first you're solving, to Michael Thiebel's point, who's the most narrow people? I'm solving for not just PhD students, but PhD students here in Hawaii. That's probably your most narrow subset. So we start to talk to them. But when you look out at the prize, you're like, oh man, there's only like 100 of them. Like, geez, plus I can't even have 100 customers. So I need to solve for PhD students around the world, or maybe university collaborators around the world, right? So that's awesome because it's a dance that we're playing. Okay, well, let's go talk to the peers that I know, the professors and PhD people that I know here. Solve that problem first. But with the mindset of like, I need to expand this beyond my core group to the next group. And the next group might be everybody here in Hawaii, or it might be all PhD students globally, all right, or across the US. Then you start to like, after you solve the problem here for these folks, you start to interview and talk to people in similar situations at other universities. And so it is a balance on like, you got to solve that problem for that core user, but you continue to keep an eye on the future user that expands your market a little bit. Is to answer your question is you got to do both at once.
But you would present it as a technology for this purpose or for general?
I would I guess we'd say presented to who?
To this space competition.
Oh, the competition. Yes, I would present it as who's the broader market.
Broadly.
The best thing about this is you want to show that for the PACE competition specifically, you want to show you have a big market. Here's all the PhD students, there's whatever, 500,000 of them in the US, number is, and then I'm going to solve for all of them. But I've already started with the score group of 100, and we have great user shit. That is the ideal situation. You have a large market, but you already have a core user base. So I would present it as the whole picture for sure. If you're putting together your pitch. That is one thing. That's actually a very important point. Like a lot of what I'm talking about here is not pitch specific. It's really focused on how you start a great product and a great business. I'll be super honest, like a lot of winning a pitch competition in any setting, there's parts of that don't really translate into the real world, right? So this is a core part. Part of the pitch is you have to paint a picture on like how big your market is. But in reality, it's kind of hard to focus on that large market. You better focus on a core group of users. There's always this give and take when kind of transfer what you're saying in a pitch to actually making a business. They don't always line up. Great. Okay. So we get there. Now what? Got to move it up a little bit now. Okay, so how do we get there? We start to talk to people. If I told you right now, go talk to 50 customers, what would be your major problem? Like, what would stop you from doing that right now?
Don't have time.
Don't have time. Okay, that's a hard one. It's a hard one. When you have time.
Money.
Money.
Like if you want to do it through social media or things like that, running out ads.
Okay, that's one.
Finding 50 people to begin with.
Yeah, find people. It's kind of the same thing. Finding people, you pay for them. If not, how would you do it for free? Great. Okay. So finding people, number one problem, right? I'll put the time thing aside. That's I don't know so much. But finding people, you guys both say the same thing. Finding people, either paid or free. How do I do it? Okay, what else? Finding people.
Convincing them to talk to you.
Convincing them to give me their time. Hardest thing on earth. Why would I talk to you? I don't care about your business idea. Okay. If I said I sat you down right now for 10 customers, are you ready to go? Feel confident?
Conveying your idea as well. Explaining your product.
Explaining product. Okay. I would flip that actually. I think the number one problem is you don't know how to extract their pain point well. Because again, when you get to your customer, the point is not to pitch your product and say, buy yes or no. The point is, what is your pain point? What would make what is your job? You didn't sit down with the customer, what is your role in relation to my solution here? And what is your major pain? So I read this, but I flip it slightly, and the hardest part is actually how to extract that information.
When you say job, like what is?
Yeah, so let's go back to our example, right? So your student, what is your job? Your job is to learn. So in the context of this solution set or this world we're playing in, what is your job in that? What is the university's job is to pay professors and train them and hold them accountable for their education, right? And then once you know the job in relation to this product or this world that you're working in, then what is their specific pain point that you're trying to solve? So I would rephrase this as the number one thing is, man, how do I find people to talk to? Pay them, it's free, how to convince them. Just getting those people is the hardest. Getting in front of them is really, really hard. But I think people often overlook when you get there, what you ask them to extract right information. So in my course, when we teach, every student group thinks that they got it. I'm gonna get there, that's great. And every time I listen to an interview, I can record the interviews. So it's like, oh man, that's rough. Huh? 5 minutes in, you ran out of questions. You thought you knew what you're talking about, but it's pretty rough, right? Because what inevitably happens, you're going to talk to somebody and you're going to say, hey, I want to talk to you about the future of education. I think there's a role to play with artificial intelligence to make your education better. As a fellow student, can you interview you? Sure, why not? I'm sitting here, I got time. Cool. What do you think of your education experience? It's great. I love everything about it. Okay. So is the interview over then?
Yeah.
No, it's not, because you already went to the pain of getting that person to sit down, bought them a cup of coffee to give them their feedback. How would you switch the concept then, right? So what we're going to learn today is how do we're going to talk about outreach, and then we're going to learn about creating an interview guide. Because what I want you guys to do is when you sit down to be prepared for when you get that interview. What actually is even harder is when you sit down with somebody, hey, great, thank you for giving me your time. We love to talk about your educational experience, and then they say, wait, educational experience, I'm not a student. Like, what are you talking about, right? Who are you? I'm a professor. It's like, oh, shoot, I got the wrong person on this, right? This is actually the hardest problem, like, it's an unexpected turn at the beginning of the interview, right? But you spent either that money or that personal equity or whatever to get that person to sit down with you, like, how do you make the most of that? So what we're talking about today is the interview guide. And I actually created some templates for you guys too. I didn't think about, I should have thought about this. I'll talk a little bit about outreach and how you might go too. Okay. But let's talk about the interview guide. So I think the number one thing is you start off like, who are you going to interview? Oh, how do you know? By the way, we already thought about who are the different beneficiaries. So whenever we think about our interview guide, we should be solving to make sure that no matter who we're sitting in front of, we know what to ask them. Right? Next is create a list of things that you're there to research. Going back to this, it's not about pitching or anything, it's about extracting knowledge and information from them, right? And so, how would you structure a question if you're a student? Well, your fellow students, my first piece of advice is think about what are some of the topics that you want to discuss. Don't get to the questions yet. This is a great example. Students, all right, well, I want to know what's your current feedback on the current professors, right? It's a little bit broad. Okay, let's break it down. What do you think about the way they teach? What do you think about their style, tone, and like their personal touch on the teaching versus the content? What do you think about their availability, the personal relationship, etc.? So I can break it down into like themes. Okay. And then once you get there, once you start to you say, okay, here's a few themes I want to research, then we focus on building questions for those themes, right? And then after that, we come back to our business model canvas. We talked about the very beginning, we didn't go over a ton of depth. You can come back and say, what other questions I want to answer that will help me solve my business problem, right? Well, let's do it in real life. It's probably easier. Let's talk about. All right. Let's talk about. Let's say we were interviewing the university, one of our core beneficiaries. University. We already kind of know their job in this role. They hire professors. They train them. They pay them. And they hold them accountable for standard of education. Okay. Not getting into the exact questions yet. What are some of the topics we might want to discuss with you're sitting there with the programs right now? When it comes to AI professors, AI education.
What kind of problems do you have with regard to faculty?
Yep. Okay. Well, let's broaden it. So existing kind of your existing faculty. Okay. We say problems like what?
Like maybe student complaints.
Okay.
High pay.
Yeah. Oh, two concepts, right? So one is from student feedback. Second concept is budget. So we want to know student feedback, budget. What else am I going to talk to? Talking to the university, educators. Maybe like scheduling is an issue, right? Somebody said some professors just want to teach at 7 a.m. All right, so that might be a third issue. Scheduling. And training. How do we train people, right? Okay, so when we get into this, we get into illicit concepts, right? And the reason I bring that up is because who here is like actually conducted like a proper customer, we call it customer discovery. I sat down with a customer and tried to interview them on what their needs are. Somebody does that works out.
I don't know if it's proper, but I've done it before.
Okay, great. Well, one person. How did you go about doing that? How did you prepare for that?
How did I prepare for that?
Yeah,
I honestly didn't prepare for it.
okay,
I
great.
just led the conversation in the way that, you know, that they're kind of exposing the problems that they have,
Yeah,
finding things in common and all.
yeah. Okay. Hey, we're talking about how to prepare for that. All right. So we come back to this, then I say, here's all the topics I want to cover. Then I start to populate this with specific questions. All right, let's go obvious one, budget. Okay, like my first question might be, how much do you spend on professor salaries every semester? Great. How much do you think in comparison to other professors? Is that, how do you feel about that budget? Is that something that you have more room budget? Do you reduce budget? Right? All right. What do you think would block you from paying more or less? Right? Then we get down to training. How do you train your current professor to make sure they deliver a standard quality of education? How do you hold them accountable for doing that? Right. So I bring this up because the number one problem people do is they start off with just a bunch of questions. And then it becomes a random list of questions. But I think it's important for us to start with like a group of topics that you want to discuss and to develop a set of questions for each one, so that you know that your list of questions is comprehensive. Or else you'll get there and you'll just talk about this for 20 minutes on like what do students think about, and then you walk away and you actually didn't hit the core part of like, well, it's expensive to hire professors, right? And then you walk away with like one view on just what is this, the university's feedback on this, but you didn't cover the other topics, right? So first start off with like, what do you want to learn? What are the core topics? And then start to populate questions that are there. Okay. Then what? Okay, so let's just say we have this, and then we have the university, we have our list of questions, we're ready to talk to any university administrator out there. Now, how would you prepare? Well, you better start getting questions for the rest of these guys, right? You might want to talk to other professors. You might want to talk to employers, you might want to talk to students, right? So by the end of this, your list of questions and topics is going to be like several hundred questions long, right? And the goal is, no matter what opportunity you get to talk about your idea, you should be prepared and ready to go. Trust me, it sounds academic and it sounds like really tedious, but every single interview I've listened to, it always gets started and they end the interview 5 minutes in because they ran out of questions or things to talk about. Or the worst case is they wasted 45 minutes and all they did was cover one topic. And they come back and they say, oh, I learned all about the university's feelings on the existing faculty, the student feedback, quality of education. And I say, well, is it cost efficient or not? I didn't ask them that. Like, why didn't you ask them that? Like, you didn't think about what else the university would think about, right? So it's important to be comprehensive, to make good use of your time, because to the earlier point, the hardest part is to get in front of people, right? Okay, questions there? All right. When you ask questions, this is hard. Questions should be open-ended. I have to like think about questions that build off of each other, right? So you think about quality of education, right? Okay, what's your student feedback on the quality of education? What's a follow-up question to that? Well, what have you tried to improve the quality of education, right? Questions should be open-ended. One of the common things I sit down and do an interview, they'll start off, what are the major problems you see with X, Y, Z? Well, you've already put their mindset that it's a problem, right? Right. Maybe if you sit down with the university administrator and say, what is the major problem with your faculty right now? Maybe they didn't think there's a problem, they have other faculty, right? Maybe you should instead start off like, what's your current experience with faculty, your current thoughts and feedback on the state of education? Right, so think of all, well, open-ended. Okay. So let's go through this. Here's what I want to do. Again, who doesn't have a business or a concept they're working on? Everybody have, okay, maybe one. Everybody else have an idea? Everybody else have an idea? Two. Does anybody want some help on developing their the research. There are 2 people here that are willing to help. Okay, boom, boom. Anybody else?
It can be anything, yeah, doesn't.
Yeah, whatever your concept is, we have another student. Or another prospective entrepreneur here that wants to answer. Anybody else want to? Okay, you guys part of. So for the next, from now, next 30 minutes. Getting ready for interviews, guys. Come up here, interview guy. Simple as that. After I'm going to talk about outreach, how do you find people? Your job is, my thing is, man, if you don't come up with these 20 questions, it's gonna fall flat, like, trust me. Gonna start with 20 questions, you have to get there, 10 of them are gonna be eliminated, without not ready for that. We're 30 minutes, and then we're gonna come back with a quick recap, and then we're gonna run, and then afterward, we're gonna talk about video guides. And just be one, I'm gonna ask people to share it. Okay. So, all right. I'm here if you want a question. An idea, then talk to the person next to you and be part of it. All right, guys. Let's pause for a minute and then we're gonna go to lunch.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Who actually made some progress on the interview questions? Progress. Who will volunteer to share your interview questions afterwards? 1, 2, 3. Okay, great, perfect. All right, so we have quick break or 40-minute break for lunch. And then at 12:40, we're going to come back and we're going to dive into some folks' interview questions. We're going to pick 1 or 2 groups or 1 or 2 entrepreneurs to go through the interview questions, get feedback, and then we're going to kind of try to bring it all together. Before that, I do want to take a pause and try to give a moment to bring it together, because as I was reflecting, I feel like sometimes it does feel like a lot of different topics that we're throwing in, right? But if you follow the arc of what we talked about, we started saying like, hey, the mindset that we want to instill is a lean mindset where we're moving quickly and we're moving fast, and we're not just planning, but we're trying to figure out if our idea works, if our concept is valid, if we have a great concept, can we still make it profitable, etc. So we have a lot of questions, and the goal is to make everything quickly so we're not just planning in our own minds. How do we do that? We first have to understand who our customers are. Then we have to go through and figure out what is their pain point and how can we solve that? And does our problem, our solution solve that? Or how do we find a solution to solve that? Then what do we do next? Well, we think we can solve it. Let's develop a minimum viable product to see if we can solve it or not, right? And throughout all this, now we're coming back to, all right, that was great in theory. Now, how do we actually figure out who our real customers are? What are the real pain points? Now that's what we're here talking about in practice. Like, how do we discover that? Okay. All right. So that's the full spectrum of like what we're trying to learn today. We're gonna take a break. 12:40. We're gonna come back. And then since you guys brought up some good points about how do I find people, we're gonna talk about that a little bit as well. And then we're gonna wrap it up at the end of the day. We're gonna talk about the last concept called product market fit. How do we develop my products? Hopefully we'll have time for a bunch of question time at the end. Right. All right. So break. But for those that are willing to share, you can also use part of lunchtime to make sure your questions are tight, ready to go. And if anybody wants to definitely volunteer, just let me know. I really want to share my questions and get feedback. If not, we'll pick one of the 2 or 3 groups. Okay. All right. So we'll see you. Grab some lunch. We'll see you in 40 minutes.
I'm off from work. You finally get time off from work, and then you go there, and then you know, they tell you they're gonna fail you for something else, and then it's like you gotta take another day off. And you know, they've been doing this thing for a while, so this is my own little personal little adjustable market thing. I just kind of quickly Googled, you know, if I was gonna pitch. The reason I probably wouldn't pitch this in real life or like to a competition is like this really only applies to the state of Hawaii, I believe. I would have to do research on every state to figure out like how they do their safety inspection and everything. But technically, you know, it costs about like $20 to get a safety done, nothing crazy. So, you know, if there was 508,000 cars, you know, quick Google search, this is how many cars were registered last year in the state. So it's like, you know, if you theoretically, this would be the total addressable market. So I kind of broke it down into 2 categories. Again, just, I forget her name, Joyce, yeah, so I asked, she kind of, we were brainstorming and I said, this would only apply to anybody that has registered cars, but she said, maybe you could just ask people like, hey, maybe you don't have a car, or maybe like you haven't registered one, and you could ask them something like, okay, well, are there reasons why? Maybe they've heard about the painful process to get a car registered, so they just said, you know what, I'll stick to the bus or whatever, so. All right, this is me, I just kind of explained the background, I guess, to make sense of it, so. Again, I didn't have a lot of time, but category one, so I'd say, all right, people that have cars registered here, so, you know, car registered in the state. Did you ever have any difficulty getting a safety inspection done? And kind of a list, so, did you ever fail a safety inspection, for what reasons? You know, maybe the top 2 tire tread, your headlights are too, like, not bright enough, bubbling tent, these are all things that I've basically failed inspections for. Did you agree with the reasons, you know, like some of them are pretty ridiculous. Where the simple fixes, you know, did you ever have to modify your car in order to pass a safety inspection? Some things that maybe may or may not have had to do to get past the safety. Did you ever get turned away from a service provider because they're fully booked up? So a lot of places don't do appointments, you know, like you gotta just roll up, and that's the worst part of it, is like you'll take time off of work, you'll go to multiple places and they don't have, so yeah, it's gonna keep going. Have you ever asked around for more lenient safety inspectors, you know? Again, personal experience, like you ask around, like, hey, like my car is gonna fail for the X, Y, and Z, could I go elsewhere? Maybe it's something that's like either A, you don't agree with, or you know, it's not necessarily a simple fix. Would you ever consider using an app? And then, so basically I would ask these kind of simple questions and then get into the meat and potatoes of like, hey, would you ever consider using an app if that were available, to like get this all set and done in your house? So, I don't know.
Yeah, good.
Care to mediate? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Next.
Here's my thoughts. Well, what are your thoughts? Go for it.
You asked something that kind of put an immediate bias on the question. You
Okay.
asked what were your negative, did you have difficulties with it? And
Yeah.
I'm like, let me think directly about my difficulties and not Suzanne, who was so pleasant and like actually helped me get my car passed, you know, because she could have had a really positive impact on my experience that could help implement positive ideas into your strategy.
Me, like Suzanne would be like the person who you got the inspection from.
Yeah, I guess I'd.
More open questions.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a good one. Thoughts, do that.
Oh, well, I mean, for thoughts, like I really love the fact that you started off with one, not open-ended question, because if they say you have a car register and say no, then you immediately just cut that person off and go to the next one.
Yeah.
So I think I really love to put the right question first.
Yeah. Screener questions.
But maybe instead of asking, did you have any frustration, you can just say, what sort of frustration do you have?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of, if someone said like, is zero frustrations, no issues, I probably would ask them like, hey, where'd you go? Like, and how did you get it done so efficiently? You know, all that kind of stuff.
What happens if I said, could we broaden this more? Because who's the beneficiary that he's talking for?
People that own cars.
People that own cars, people that register their cars. But you could make an argument of, like, it's not necessarily an app that solves the problem, right? Like the first step is like, what is the pain point, right? And so, I mean, I think it is like, we can kind of make a few jumps here because, you know, we all have cars, you probably talked to a bunch of your friends with cars, and so you've inherently done some research, right? But, and for this academic exercise, I'd say, you know, first we could step back and say, in product development, we'll talk about first principles, like what is like the core principle? The core principle is what we talked about. It's like, it sucks, like the time that it takes to get this done. It's terrible. I had to register, I had to go down there, I had to go down there multiple times. And on top of that, that's number one, like the time, right? Number two, there's like this bucket, like, do you even agree with like the safety inspection? Maybe that's a totally different category of things, right? So number one is, I would say, like, we kind of jumped into an app already, right? But a lot of these questions are really just more broad on like, what is the core pain point you as a registered car owner here in the state have, right? And then what's, when we think about our process here, what else is missing?
Possibly the safety, people doing the safety inspection.
Oh yeah, so I did think about that.
Yes.
But I only had one. I'm gonna have time because I realized that part of the next step.
Yeah. right? So let's talk about that for safety shops, right? We could talk about like, how do you, like, what is your experience? Like, how do you do safety inspections, right? What could you? It would be interesting of like, get their experience on like, why don't they build their own app? Right? So they try that, right? Who else would we want to talk to? It's somebody really important here.
Let's say like state regulators.
The regulators, right? You might want to start with that first, right? Like, why don't you just have an app that matches, you can create this, an app that matches car shops with car owners. Your car shop's embedded, you register on the app, right? Why don't they just create this, right? So we step back, we say, okay, who are we talking about first? And granted, like, we don't have time to do this, right? So step back, we go through our list of beneficiaries, we identify 3 car owners, car shops, state regulators, right? And then we go through and we start to develop the questions. What we talk about is getting them more broad, a little more broad. I would also say, think about like, for like the car shops, right? Like, let's talk about the car shops. Like, there's probably a few categories of things, right? One is like, what's your current experience? How do you run safety inspections now? Number 2 is like, what tools do you currently have like to get customers? Why would they want this? They might want another tool to get more customers, right? And so what tools do you currently have to get more customers? What kind of online tools do you use right now, right? 3 is, how do you work with the state regulators, right? So there's kind of a couple buckets of questions, and with each one of those, I would have start to develop the questions, right? And even within the registered car owners, I think there's kind of 2, 3 themes we're talking about. 1 is like time. How do you find the time to do this? 2 is like the repairs and how do you go through it and get your part pass, right? Again, it feels like a little bit academic, like, oh, why do we be supposed to like structured and specific? Is to be as comprehensive in our research as possible. Now, this one is because we're inherently, many of us are users. I think, you know, there's a little bit of a knowledge leap that we already have, or like a head start that we already have because we've been through this or we've had friends go through this. So it is a little bit academic to go through and create like a very detailed list of questions here, but still helpful. Great example. Great idea. Great idea. Yeah. All right. We've got a little bit of time. Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? We have probably time for one more. Yeah. Jump on up. Do you have mine typed up?
Yes, there's.
Plug on in. So recap. Travel. I'm going to do the 30-second recap of your concept.
Okay, so
Your problem you're approaching.
So the problem I'm approaching is tourism is not sustainable, but it's gonna happen in the market. Oh, the market is constantly, especially since like the drop during COVID, it's gonna continue to increase. So I want to be able to do that sustainably.
I'm like dragging the Word document over.
So anyways, I want to do that sustainably, and there's a negative connotation between our tourists and locals. And I want to bridge that gap. And also when travelers come to new places, they don't necessarily know what to do. They don't know the etiquette of where they're going, the cultural barriers. And I thought, why is that a problem? And I think it's education. We're just not educated on new places that we're traveling to. So yeah, that's kind of the goal. Is I want to provide a service that connects locals to traveling tourists, so they get a unique cultural experience where they travel. And these hosts will provide accommodations, and the traveler can choose if that's something that they're comfortable with, if they want to do, or they can solely just focus on the service. So here are the questions we came up with. The questions in red are a little bit more quantitative. So yeah, we didn't put them in any order like you did, Noah. But open-ended questions. How do you feel about tourism? What is your experience using travel platforms, apps, or online services? Have you ever had a tour guide elaborate? A tour guide. Have you ever had a tour guide? There should be a question mark right here. Elaborate on the experience, the price, the most memorable part of the experience. What safety precautions do you take while traveling? How do you plan your trips? How much is budgeted for your travels in Hawaii? Because we were thinking about the MVP perspective. We would want to start locally just because it's feasible. But in my head, when I'm manifesting this idea, I definitely see it going international. What would make traveling to Hawaii easier for you? How long do you plan to spend here? What do you want to experience or see in your time in Hawaii? What do you recommend to tourists to do while traveling? Some of these questions too are for the hosts and some of them are for the travelers. Before meeting someone from social media platform, what do you think about? So like kind of like the risk when you meet someone off like Instagram, Bumble, Tinder, or if you're taking an Uber. Yeah, there's risk involved in all the apps. How do you educate others about your culture? That would be like a host question. Yeah, and then these two questions in red are a little bit more complicated. Like I said, how much money do you spend on rent each month? Just to kind of get an idea of how much we should. When we were writing this, we were kind of thinking like, what would be our price point, especially here, because when I think about this DIA and I think about it internationally, I think about how far the US dollar goes in different economies and how much you could really change a person's life and like provide potentially a new career option for people to just live and enjoy the culture and the land that they live on and educate others. Would you consider this opportunity to be connected? Oh, would you consider an opportunity to be connected with a local to provide a unique travel experience? And would you prefer to spend more time in, I think it was like in nature? Oh, in your local area or area where you reside, enjoying outdoor activities?
This is a great example. Okay. First off, right, we're putting in two different groups. We're putting, if we go back to who's our beneficiaries, we've got tourists and locals. Who else? Who else could we interview?
Oh, we had the idea of Airbnb hosts.
Yep, existing hosts on other platforms. So locals, and
travel, middlemen, like wine airlines.
Yep. Other travel agencies, providers, etc. Okay, so
I was gonna say one platform, I've never used it, but I always thought it excellent. It was called couch surfing or something like that.
Yeah.
That's like talking to those, not necessarily hosts, right? I like talking to those guys as well.
yeah, so you might want to say, talk to the tourists, talk to existing locals that are hosts, people on other platforms. We start to see some of the beneficiaries. You might have to touch a computer.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, we've already got a few. Let's just pick up the tourist questions. She's already got, I see 3 distinct themes. Can we kind of see them?
How do you feel about tourism? How do you currently plan your trips?
Trip planning for sure. Safety. She's got a couple questions on safety in there, right? Money, cost, budget, money. Okay. So let's start to bucket these, right? And there's a reason for that answer. So trip planning. Budget, money. Sorry. That finger. Safety. This is a good example, okay, so, oh, and then she's got kind of general tourism questions, right? All right, so how do you feel about tourism? What's your experience? All right, how do you feel about tourism? Boom, here we go. What's your experience on travel apps, platforms? Have you ever tour guide? These are clearly in this bucket of your existing trip planning. How do you do that? All right. What safety precautions do you take while traveling? Okay, here's why I'm doing this, right? So we get this, and then she says, where's the other safety? Before meeting someone on social media, what do you think about? I inherently think there's a safety question in there, right?
Yes.
All right. Let's look at this bucket, right? So already I started to put in buckets. Why do I do that? So I want to be comprehensive in each topic, right? I love it because you already start to think, or if I'm a tourist, what's my mindset? Well, I want to know how to plan. I want to know how to be safe. I want to know how much I'm going to spend. Okay, all right, here we go. Now, then we jump into, let's focus on safety. What safety precautions do you take while traveling? What do you mean by that?
So for me, when I travel abroad, I always try to take pepper spray.
Yep. Okay. So physical safety.
I research places that I perceive to be safe, like what makes them safe. I have a set of guidelines.
All right. How do you research safe areas before you travel? So here it's like, what do you do every pepper spray? How do you research beforehand? What do you do if you're meeting somebody? It's also like the safety, like what do you about your money? You're gonna give money to somebody on a random platform now, right? So how do you safeguard your money, right? Why do I bring it up? Because each one we want to think this holistically. Like first, we want to say, are these the three most important things to tourism? Planning your trip, budget, and safety. We think these are the three most important things. Maybe, yeah. Okay, great. Within safety, do we feel like we're being comprehensive? Well, me, it was like, well, what is safety precautions? I think that's too broad. All right. Now, I'll reframe that to safety precautions, like physical safety, pepper spray, pre-planning, also like meeting up with somebody, exchanging money or exchanging value. Right? Like, so we get down to like very specific questions. So this is why we break it down. Like number one, we're covering the most important topics that would help us uncover the pain points. And number two, within each one of these topics, we feel like we've got all the answers, all the questions that we need to answer, right? So let's talk about budget, right? Budget, where's your budget questions? How much have you budgeted for your trip in Hawaii? We got that. We're gonna move this to this bucket here. All right. What other budget questions would you ask to a general tour?
What quality, like would you rather, do you value experience or do you value like standard of living, like?
Okay, like how do you, so maybe.
5-star versus 1-star.
Yep.
You know, the same.
How do you split your budget? Thinking about quality of accommodations. How do you spend your budget? I should say that's good. Inherently, we're asking how do you prioritize? How do you prioritize your budget? Quality of accommodations. I'll take a leap here. I'll just say quality versus quantity. You want to do more things or you want the best, highest quality things, right? Okay. How are you gonna spend your money? You want to get a 5-star hotel or you want to have a 10-week trip instead of a 1-week trip? Okay. How are you spending your money? How much money do you have? Right? What else do we ask for budget? I don't know. I don't have an answer.
What would be an ideal amount to spend?
Yeah. Or maybe another question, how do you figure out your travel budget? What is-
Specifically, like what's going towards flights and what's going
Mm,
towards your experience.
How do you determine your travel budget? Follow-up question. Specifically. Flights, flight budget versus hotel or accommodations. Versus activities. Great. Not important. The exact questions are important. The important part is the thought process, right? We're taking a very structured approach here. When we get down to, we realize actually our budget questions, we could have added more. Like, how do we figure that out? It's because we started to think about things and like, all right, it's not just a random question about what is your budget, but I want to deeply understand how you think about budgeting. Now we start to have more questions there, right? I want to deeply understand how you think about safety. We start to develop more and more questions there. That's why we have this structured approach, okay? It's really like, this is going to give you like the full view on each one of these topics. And then you step back and are these the 3 most important topics, right? Maybe there's others, right? Maybe there's one just about like user experience. Like, you know, using an app, like, is that maybe user experience and making it easy to use is the most important topic? I don't know.
Right, I was gonna say, I'm with you on the user experience, or I was saying the question as well, like, maybe the logistical part to use, probably pretty forms.
Yep.
It looks like that, she's are there already, like, working on that, so I think maybe like focus on that too, how's that logistically gonna look, meaning how do these people actually look at it, or like what, you know, how, what's the execution part? You know, as opposed to just, you know, budget on safety, but like, okay, how do you look at it? You get there.
Yeah, right. She already started to talk about it. Okay, let's go down that route, right? Like, how do you plan your trips? What would make it easier for you, right? How do you actually book it, right? So it kind of overlaps with trip planning, right? This I kind of view more as like, what platforms do you use? And then this is a little bit about the actual like step-by-steps, right? But the reason I break that out, it seems like it's all kind of one thing. It's not. Because this, I'm curious about, like, do you use a tour guide? Do you use the platform and app? This is a competitor question, group of questions. This is an experience group of questions, right? But this is really intricate, and it's not like a formula that I can easily give you. The main point is we're trying to get as comprehensive as possible, and the best way to do it is structured, right? So we might even kind of break this up to like trip planning. I might sit there and say, actually, this is more like platforms, websites, tour guides, right? Versus this is really like the step-by-step plan, right? Okay. Why is that important? Because this will tell you who to research as your competitor. What do they do? This will tell you the user experience that you want to create and what do people currently do and what is their pain point that they currently do, right? Okay. So I'll pause there. But I think this one was an example that helps you think about like, why do you need a structured approach to this, okay? Now, last thing I'll pause on, going back to what is the use case for this? It's important because it's like you might not ever know who you're going to get in front of at that moment, right? So you might be at a party and just run into somebody that works at Couchsurfing. Oh, great, cool. Actually, can I ask you a few questions? And you get up here like, well, shit, all my questions are about tourists. I didn't have the second bucket yet on what to ask competitor tour platforms, right? So that's why we have like a very comprehensive list, okay? Let me go to page 2. Page 2 is all my questions for other platforms. If I ever meet somebody from Airbnb, Couchsurfing, etc., what do they do, right? All right, great. Even when I get there, maybe the reason to have this comprehensive set of questions is, you know what? I've already asked people like 10 million times how they develop their budget. I really understand that. I really need to get more into the user experience and what experience they want, right? So the structured approach helps you develop a deep research approach. And so you have the most comprehensive view of the problem and how to solve the problem. Okay, thank you. Two great ideas, by the way. This is some great ideas out there. Okay, so I bring that up. Okay, I bring that up, and then the first question that we started with this part of the exercise. Well, how do I find somebody, right? How do I find somebody? How do I find a customer? Thoughts? The number one way, just get out there and just cold call, start emailing people. LinkedIn, social media. Just get out there, find people in the relevant industry. So let's go to travel. Let's say I wanted to meet somebody, Couchsurfing or Airbnb or one of these other platforms. How would you do that?
Find people that have recently traveled through. Hotels.
Maybe you could just go to White and like stop them, maybe and ask them.
Okay, you could go like you. But let's say we want to find either people that work at Airbnb or recent hosts. How would you find them? Sign up for Airbnb. Sign for Airbnb, and then what?
Go stay there for a night and then talk to the owner.
You could do that. Love it. What else?
It's like, you know how I have like the hosting like online, because they message them, ask them about.
Boom. Classic cold call, classic cold email. Just go on, you can find all the hosts, you can message them, right? Or you can, with some creative searching, you can find them some other ways. They all have their own websites, right? A lot of them are just listed on other sites as well, right? Part of it is just get out there and talk to people, right? So I've got, to help you with that, I've thought about this. So people always ask me, okay, how do I get out there and talk to people? Well, it is a very formulaic thing, actually, to be honest. Can you guys read that? Okay, here's my formula for a cold email. Number 1, paragraph 1, 2 sentences. Your goal, we start off is to instill trust. I'm not a cold caller, however it is, right? So in my class, when we do customer research, we play with little nuances of the wording. I'm a student, an undergrad student, people love to help students. I'm a researcher from UH Manoa. People are, oh, interesting, a researcher's calling me, right? So how do you build credibility? If you are referred by somebody, the easiest way is so-and-so referred me to you. Please talk to me. Easy, right? If not, you gotta think about quickly. People determine whether or not they're gonna finish that email right there, that first sentence issue. So you gotta start off, build credibility quickly. The next part here, in a quick 2 or 3 sentences, what is the ask, right? So here you build credibility, sorry, and then you should also give a little 1 sentence context. I'm working on a new travel concept, would love to pick your brain. Great. Specifically, I would love 30 minutes of your time to ask you about your experience as an Airbnb host. I feel that it is not offering the true local experience. I would love to share my ideas and hear your feedback. Boom. Paragraph 3, the specific next step. I'm available on Monday at 2 o'clock. Are you available? Yes or no? Right. So this is the way it works really well. By the way, folks that don't want to start something and want to go network and find a job, and people always ask me, how do I network? Same thing, go on LinkedIn, same thing. 1 or 2 sentences, instill trust. 1 sentence, what am I asking for? Then if they want to move on, give them a little more detail. And then 1 sentence at the end, that's the specific on the ask. I'm free at this time, are you available, yes or no? You can have your own, but this is my formula that works pretty well, I think. All right, so I've loaded up there. I'll share this with you guys afterwards. I also have, from one of my former student groups, I shared one of their interview guides to show how comprehensive they got. So this was a helicopter safety problem. They're working on how to make helicopters safer. So then they started off with like a broad set of questions. Then they got to specific questions on the experience. They got to questions for pilots, for crew chiefs, for medics, for the certification process, how to educate people properly, and mechanical issues, engineering issues, etc. So you could see how they bucketed their thinking. Their overall project was, how do you make helicopter flights safer in the Army? Then they actually bucketed it down by beneficiaries and by different use cases. And then they developed the questions. I just share that as like a good example on how to be very comprehensive. All right. I think, if I'm being honest, the number one hardest part is, yes, we can go to Waikiki and talk to people about their travel experience. What is really the number one blocker from stopping you guys besides time?
Did you share that?
Yes, I'll share that.
Okay.
I think it's like approach anxiety. A lot of people
Yes.
think about it, and when you do it, you're like kind of hesitant to go out and reach out to them.
Everyone's got nerves of steel when we're talking about it, but when I say go out and actually do it, like, man, 90% of the people are just wilt away. Like, everyone talks big in the classroom. When they get out, it's hard. It's hard talking to people. It's really hard. So I'll end with I won't say what to do, but you guys know who this is? Steve Jobs. Please, everyone's got to know Steve Jobs, right? Okay, so Steve Jobs, let's hear what he has to say. We're practical. We try to be very precise. But at the end of the day, like the number one thing that just stops people is like just fear. That's it, right? So actually, if I had to walk away and say like, what's going to make somebody more successful at launching your business? Is it following this framework, or is it just getting out there? That's me. Like people that just get out there and just try, like, are going to be way more successful than people that master the framework. Right? I try to give you a tool to help it easier to structure your thinking, but it like some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know are super disorganized, super deconstructed. They just get out there and they just try, right? So that's my last point. You got to get out there and try. Don't take it from me, take it from Steve Jobs, right? Yeah. I mean, he's talking about how he got to start, right? He just called somebody, Bill Hewlett is like Hewlett Packard. He was like the Steve Jobs before Steve Jobs, like an original like Silicon Valley icon. He was just, that'd be like somebody our age just calling up Jeff Bezos and just be like, hey, I was wondering if I could talk to you about this one thing. That's what he said. I just called him up, right? Okay. So questions. I have one last concept to go through. Any questions? All right. The last concept is, what is the end goal? The end goal out of this is we're trying to find product market fit. What is that? What is product market fit? Has anybody heard of this concept? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yep. What is product market fit?
Product market fit is basically having customers, like in the simplest form.
Is it? I mean, so if you have 2 customers, you have product market fit?
Oh, no, like having customers, you know, to sustain your business.
Sustain your business. Maybe. What else? Product, I mean, this is the hard part. There is no definition of product market fit. Right, good.
It's like finding like a space for you in the market, like squeezing way in there.
Yeah, part of that. Part of all these things.
Like, as we were talking about before, like kind of find the problem first and then find the solution.
Yep.
Like make your competitive
Yep.
advantage.
Find your space in your niche, find the solution that solves the pain point, get the customers to pay for that. It's kind of all of these things. It is hard because there's no definition, but what we're achieving out of this, what is success, is finding product market fit. At the highest high levels, we talked about who are your customers, what are their pains or their gains, what is your product and the value driver, and will it solve it? Like that's at the highest level it is, but and it sounds easy, but in actuality, it is all these things together, and it's very hard. It's very hard. Like people, well, there's essays and essays and essays written about what is product market fit. Some people like to put a number on it, like a 10%, 1,000% growth rate. It's like, okay, if I had a 900% growth rate, would that be product? Yes, it still would be, right? Some people try to talk about it like you've solved the pain point, maybe, but if people don't buy it, do you have product market? Maybe not, right? But in the end, though, that's what we're trying to achieve. And the way I just like to think about it is, what are we here for, right? We're in service of finding a product that's going to sell, that's going to get users. And the whole point of this is we did all this academic exercise on who's our customers, what's the value prop, how do we develop an MVP. But in the end of the day, what we're trying to figure out is, do I have a product that will meet their needs? Like that's what we're here. And will they buy it? Will they use it? Will my product sustain, right? Will my service sustain? Will my whatever it is that I'm building sustain, right? All right. And to bring it all together, I like to think about it as this process is this evolutionary process that's like iterative. First, we started off with like maybe not even a problem. Maybe it's just a general area we want. In our idea, we didn't really have a problem, right? We just said we want to use AI to improve education. You know, we'll kind of figure out the problem along the way. You start to interview people, you might refine that problem, right? We kind of went back and forth. Is it an AI professor or not? Or is it just AI to improve education? Maybe you start to refine that. At some point, you start to define who your beneficiaries are and what are their value props. You have to go through, do a lot more interviews. Some of those interviews might say I have to redefine the problem, right? Maybe we decided that I scoped the problem out incorrectly and I need to redefine the problem, start the process all over. But at some point, you say, okay, now I figured out sufficiently what the core problem is, my core beneficiary, and let's develop an MVP to solve their problem and see if we have something that works. And then you might get feedback from me. Nobody came, nobody bought it, nobody attended my robot professor's lecture, nobody liked it. Okay, what happened? Maybe we need to redefine the problem again. We need to go back and do more customer discovery, understand why they didn't like it. We're gonna come back in the loop. And then at some point, hopefully we achieve nirvana and find the product market fit. But my big point is it is this cyclical process. At all points, you're kind of trying to move down this journey, but you're constantly being pushed back by the feedback that you hear, right? I like to think about it as it's a series of kind of hypotheses or guesses. I think I know what the problem in this industry is. Let me go talk to people. Who do I talk to? Well, I got to figure out who my beneficiaries are. Okay, that's great. I think now I talk to them. I'm pretty sure I know what their most important pain points are. How do I know? Well, let's launch an MVP. Let's see if we can solve that. Okay, great. So at each point, we have a series of guesses and we're trying to use customer feedback to move it to the next point of our journey. And when our customer feedback validates that our hypothesis is correct, we can move on. If it invalidates our hypothesis, then we need to go backwards and learn, right? So this is, in summary, like this is the 4 hours we sat here today, one slide. Okay, with that said, I think one of the core things here inherently is failure, right? That's when if you go back to one of the first slides, all the way at the beginning. What differentiates the traditional business model versus the lean mindset? It's that failure here is like, well, you fire somebody. It should be a rare exception, but in the lean methodology is expected because that's when we learn, we fail, and we continue to learn and keep iterating. It's part of the process, right? So that's one thing. Go back to like, yeah, you might not want to get out there and talk to somebody on the street because fear of failure, fear falling in your face, trying to talk to somebody. Well, it's expected in this process, right? And I'll close with one last word of wisdom. So this is Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, the clothing company. And so she's talking about failure. Oh, again, what is wrong with me?
Growing up, my father used to ask my brother and me what we had failed at the dinner table, which was so interesting. And he'd celebrate it and he'd actually be disappointed if I didn't have something that I failed at that week. So I can remember saying, Dad, I tried out for this and I was horrible. And he would actually high five me and say, congratulations, way to go. And what it did was just reframe my definition of failure. Failure for me became not trying versus the outcome. So many people don't take risks for fear of failure. They don't start the business. They don't go create the art they want to create, or they don't go try out to be in the play or whatever it is for the fear of failure. And once you redefine that for yourself and realize that failure is just not trying, then life opens up to you in many ways. And I would also, my dad would encourage me anytime something didn't go the way I expected it to, or maybe I got embarrassed by a situation, to write down where the hidden gifts were and what I got out of it. And I started realizing in everything there was some amazing nugget that I wouldn't have wanted to pass out. At Spanx, to encourage people to fail, I'm bringing up my failures in front of the team often. So I will stand up and I call them oops of Spanx. Some of them are the oops throughout the history of Spanx. Some of them can be recent oops that I did, but I'm always openly talking about it. If you're gonna have an oops, part of the beauty of it is twofold. If there's a failure quote or an oops in your life, if you learn from it and if you can laugh about it, then it's all worth it.
Great, right? So I bring that up because we talked a lot about the tools, frameworks, the mindset, but at the end of the day, like we just got to get out and accept that failures, not just like, oh, it's bound to happen, but like that's the system here that we're trying to instill. It's like the more you fail, the more you learn, quicker you iterate, quicker you get better. So don't go the old school way of sitting there and planning and hoping that it works, right? Get out there and fail so that you can figure out how to make it better. All right. The last thing I'll close with is I think one thing that I would be remiss to say is not to say is skip overs. I get it. A lot of you are just like, that was great. Thank you for the, in theory, like how to start a business and launch a product, but I really want to win the PACE venture competition. Okay, I got it. This was not specifically just geared towards competition, but it is. We talked about, this was, I believe the criteria for round one. I think I pulled this off the site correctly. We talked about number one criteria, what is the value proposition? Describe the problem your business solves. What does the business do to solve the problem? And what makes the business solution attractive to customers? Hopefully we talked about that today. Market opportunity, describe the existing market. How does the company fit in the market and company's ability to capture part or all of that market. Hopefully we talked about value capture and solving a pain point, but also how big is that market. Talked a little bit about this customer segments. We talked a lot about customer discovery, describe the business customers and how the business will discover new customers. I think this is a little bit more about finding customers. This part we didn't touch on as much. Product market fit. Whole thing, I know we talked about the end, but really the whole thing is around getting to product market fit. Describe how the business is successfully identified the target market and its product or service. I won't read it all, but we talked about that. Competitive advantage.
Sorry, I wanted to point out, this is my fault, but there's a copy and paste error, number 5 is identical to number 4. So sorry about that, I updated the website since so.
Oh, perfect, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
And the competitive advantage, I put in there, but it's kind of, we talked a little bit about competitors. And then product or service development feasibility. Hopefully we talked about that a lot. So I feel like value prop, market opportunity, product market fit, feasibility, we talked about that a ton today. So I know that the next bootcamp is really talking more about some of the operational and the financial issues. But hopefully we cover the majority of the first 6. So that's how it relates to that, if you guys are interested in just first and foremost about the venture competition. All right. So with that said, what time are we supposed to wrap at? 1:40, right? Okay, we got a lot of time. Questions? Comments? If not, we can wrap early and I'll be around. But
I think it's maybe a question for you, Jeff, like if you could point out like one thing, like what do you think separates the ones that are like successful or the ones that are not?
Yeah.
Or like those who
Simple.
keep trying, like what would be like one thing that's stood out to you?
simple. Like from a structure, like a framework standpoint, understanding your value prop. People get so caught up in like, what's my revenue model? Am I going to be a subscription or one-time fee? Am I going to be selling on my own e-commerce store, selling 300? Like, did you find the need and did you solve that need? That is the most important thing from like the kind of product and business building standpoint. But not from a mentality standpoint, it's just failure. That's it. I think everyone's so scared. And I think everybody's like so brave when they're writing the words on the page. But when I get out there, like that's what really, from a mindset, that's what separates. To Steve Jobs' point, people that do things and people that just dream about doing things. Yeah, it's a good question. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? All right, well, we can wrap a little early and I'll be around if you guys want to ask questions about your specific ideas or whatever. All right, cool. Thanks, guys.